allow yourself to settle comfortably wherever you are, knowing that the next few hours are yours alone. Feel your body beginning to release the tensions of the day. Notice how your shoulders soften, how your breath naturally slows and deepens. The modern world with its constant demands fades away as we prepare to travel together through timeless stories of awakening, compassion, and profound peace. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that our true nature is already perfect, already peaceful. Tonight, through gentle stories and teachings, we'll rediscover this truth that lives quietly within you. Like a lamp that has never been extinguished but was simply covered by a cloth, your inner peace awaits only the gentle removal of what obscures it. As your breathing continues to slow and deepen, let your mind's eye travel with me to ancient Asia, where beneath towering mountains and alongside flowing rivers, dedicated seekers discovered truths that can transform how we experience life itself. These are not mere stories, but invitations to a different way of being. Feel yourself walking along a dirt path that winds through misty hills. The air is cool against your skin, carrying the scent of pine and wild jasmine. Your feet find their natural rhythm on the worn stones that countless pilgrims have traveled before you. In the distance, a bell rings out across the valley. Its clear, pure tone seems to hang in the air long after the metal has stopped vibrating. This is the morning bell of Shoji Temple, where an old monk named Dogen has been the keeper for nearly 40 years. You approach the temple as dawnlight filters through ancient trees. The buildings are simple, weathered wood that has taken on the color of the earth itself. Everything here speaks of quiet devotion, of lives dedicated to something deeper than the rush of everyday concerns. Dogen emerges from the temple, his movements unhurried despite his age. He approaches the large bronze bell that hangs beneath a wooden shelter. This bell has called the community to meditation for over 3 centuries, its voice unchanged by the passing of seasons and generations. A young novice monk approaches Dogen with a question that has been troubling him. "Master," he says, bowing respectfully, "I've been practicing meditation for 2 years now, but my mind is still filled with thoughts. When I sit in stillness, instead of peace, I find only noise. The other monks seem so calm, so focused. What am I doing wrong?" Dogen looks at the young man with kind eyes that have seen many students struggle with this same question. Instead of answering with words, he picks up the large wooden mallet used to strike the bell. "Listen carefully," Dogen says, and strikes the bell once. The deep, resonant tone flows out across the valley, rich and pure. Then he strikes it again and again, each ring as beautiful as the first. "Tell me," Dogen asks, "when I strike this bell, does it try to make a beautiful sound? Does it worry whether its voice is pure enough? Does it compare itself to other bells?" The novice considers this. "No, master. The bell simply responds to being struck. The sound arises naturally from its nature. And when the sound fades," Dogen continues, striking the bell once more, "does the bell grasp at the fading tone, trying to hold on to it? Does it worry about when the next ring will come?" "No," the young monk realizes. The bell returns to silence without resistance. Dogen nods, setting down the mallet. "Your mind is like this bell. Thoughts arise when conditions cause them to arise, just as sound emerges when the bell is struck. The bell doesn't try to stop being a bell when it's ringing, and it doesn't try to keep ringing when the sound naturally fades." The young monk's eyes widen with understanding. "So I shouldn't try to stop my thoughts? Would you ask the bell to stop responding when struck?" Dogen replies gently. "Instead, be like the bell itself. Let thoughts arise and pass away naturally without grasping or pushing away. The bell's nature remains unchanged whether it's ringing or silent. Your true nature remains peaceful whether thoughts are present or absent. As the morning progresses, the novice sits in meditation with a different understanding. When thoughts arise, he no longer fights them or judges himself. Like the bell's tone flowing out across the valley, thoughts come and go in the spacious awareness of his mind. The struggle ceases, and with it, a deeper peace emerges. Years later, when the novice has become a teacher himself, visitors often comment on the unusual serenity that seems to surround him. He always credits his old teacher Dogen and points to the temple bell. "That bell taught me everything I needed to know about meditation," he says with a smile. Our minds are naturally perfect instruments of awareness. We need only stop trying to be something other than what we are. As you rest tonight, remember Dogen's bell. Notice how thoughts naturally arise and pass away in your awareness like sounds echoing across a valley. There's no need to fight this natural process, no need to judge yourself when your mind wanders. Like the bell returning to silence, your awareness remains peaceful and unchanged beneath the movement of thoughts. Let your breathing deepen as you feel this truth settle into your understanding. Your mind, like the bell, has a natural state of peace that is never truly disturbed by the temporary sounds that pass through it. As your body grows heavier and more relaxed, let your mind travel to a small temple garden in the mountains of Tibet. Here, an old monk named Tenzin has tended the same patch of earth for 30 years. The garden is renowned throughout the region, not for exotic flowers or perfect landscaping, but for something much more unusual. The morning sun slants through the Himalayan air as you approach Tenzin, who kneels beside a bed of vegetables. His weathered hands move slowly through the soil, and you notice something remarkable. Among the carefully tended plants grow what most would call weeds. Dandelions bloom alongside sacred lotus flowers, wild grasses grow beside meditation herbs, and thorny brambles intermingle with fragrant jasmine. A visiting monk from the valley below watches Tenzin work, his confusion evident. Finally, he approaches the old gardener with a respectful bow. "Venerable Tenzin," the visitor says, "I've heard of your garden's fame, but I must admit I'm puzzled. In my monastery, we work very hard to remove all weeds, to create perfect order and beauty. But here you seem to welcome everything. Surely these wild plants compete with your cultivated ones?" Tenzin sits back on his heels, his face serene as he considers the question. He gestures toward a cluster of dandelions growing beside some carefully planted herbs. "Tell me, friend," Tenzin says, "who decided that some plants are weeds and others are flowers? Who determined that one form of life is more welcome than another?" The visiting monk starts to answer, then pauses, realizing the depth of the question. Tenzin continues, his voice gentle as the morning breeze. "When I first came to this garden 30 years ago, I too spent my days pulling out unwanted plants, fighting against what I judged as imperfect. I was exhausted, frustrated, and the garden never looked the way I thought it should." He stands slowly, brushing soil from his hands. "Then one day, I sat quietly among these plants and really looked at them. I saw that the dandelions fed the bees just as surely as the planted flowers. The wild grasses prevented erosion and provided shelter for small creatures. Even the thorny brambles had their purpose, protecting delicate seedlings from harsh winds." The visiting monk looks around the garden with new eyes, beginning to see the intricate web of relationships Tenzin describes. I realized, Tenzin continues, that my idea of the perfect garden was causing me to fight against the natural wisdom of life itself. Each plant has its role, its gift. When I stopped labeling them as wanted or unwanted, and instead learned to work with their natural qualities, the garden began to flourish in ways I never could have planned. He points to a section where wild mint grows alongside cultivated vegetables. The mint keeps insects away from the tomatoes. The deep roots of what I once called weeds bring minerals up from the subsoil to nourish the shallow-rooted herbs. What I thought was chaos was actually a deeper order that my limited understanding couldn't grasp. The visiting monk nods slowly. But surely some plants are harmful? Some things must be removed? Ah, Tenzin smiles. Now you ask the deeper question. Yes, sometimes intervention is needed. But I've learned to distinguish between what is truly harmful and what I simply don't understand. A plant that crowds out others completely or brings disease requires attention. But most of what I once fought against was simply different from my expectations. As the morning unfolds, Tenzin shows the visitor how he works with the garden's natural tendencies. He doesn't impose rigid order, but guides growth with gentle wisdom. Some plants he relocates to where they can thrive without overwhelming others. Some he prunes to encourage balance. But he no longer wages war against the natural world. The most important lesson, Tenzin says, as they sit quietly among the diverse plants, is that peace comes not from perfect control, but from wise acceptance. This garden has taught me to approach my own mind the same way. The visitor looks puzzled, so Tenzin explains further. Our minds are like gardens too. Thoughts and emotions arise naturally, some we welcome and some we judge as weeds. For years I fought against anger, fear and doubt, trying to cultivate only positive thoughts. But this created the same exhaustion I felt in the garden. Now I treat difficult emotions like these wild plants. I acknowledge them, learn from them, and work skillfully with their energy rather than trying to eliminate them completely. Anger, when understood, can become passionate compassion. Fear can become wise caution. Doubt can become healthy questioning. As the day progresses, the visiting monk finds himself relaxing in ways he hasn't experienced in years. The garden's acceptance of diversity, its allowance for imperfection, creates a peace deeper than any he's found in perfectly manicured temple grounds. When he prepares to leave, he bows deeply to Tenzin. Thank you for showing me the wisdom of the unweeded garden. I understand now that I've been making life much harder than it needs to be. Tenzin nods, his hands already returning to the soil. Remember, friend, perfection is not about controlling every detail. True perfection lies in understanding the natural wisdom that connects all things, then working harmoniously with that wisdom rather than against it. As you rest tonight, consider your own inner garden. What thoughts and feelings have you been treating as weeds, fighting against and trying to eliminate? Can you sense the natural wisdom in allowing them to exist while skillfully guiding their growth? Notice how your body naturally relaxes when you stop fighting against the thoughts that arise. Like Tenzin's garden, your mind can find peace not through perfect control, but through wise acceptance and gentle guidance. Feel your breathing slow as you imagine yourself sitting in that mountain garden, surrounded by the perfect imperfection of life flowering in all its diverse forms. Here, in this place of acceptance, true rest becomes possible. Let your awareness drift deeper now, like settling into still water. Feel yourself traveling to a remote forest path in ancient China where tall pines cast long shadows and the air carries the scent of earth and moss. Walking along this isolated trail is a Buddhist monk named Ryokan. His robes are simple, patched in several places, and he carries only a small bundle containing his few possessions, a spare robe, a wooden bowl, and a collection of writings about compassion and wisdom that he plans to share at the next village. Ryokan walks with the unhurried pace of someone who has nowhere urgent to be. His face reflects the calm contentment that comes from years of meditation practice. He pauses occasionally to appreciate a bird's song or the play of sunlight through the leaves, finding joy in the simple gifts each moment offers. As evening approaches and shadows lengthen, Ryokan becomes aware of footsteps behind him on the path. Soon, a rough-looking man emerges from behind the trees, blocking the monk's way. The man's clothes are worn and dirty, his face hardened by years of difficult living, and in his hand he holds a long knife that glints in the fading light. "Stop there, monk," the bandit says, his voice harsh with desperation. "I know your type carries money for temples and poor people. Hand over whatever you have, or things will go badly for you." Most people would respond to such a threat with fear, anger, or attempts to bargain or escape. But Ryokan simply stops walking and regards the bandit with the same gentle attention he had given to the birds and trees. There's no fear in his eyes, but neither is there any judgment or condemnation. "Of course, friend," Ryokan says calmly, setting down his bundle. "You may have anything I carry, but I should warn you, my possessions are quite simple. You may be disappointed." The bandit, expecting resistance or pleading, is momentarily taken aback by this response. He watches suspiciously as Ryokan opens his bundle and lays out its contents: the spare robe, the wooden bowl, and the small collection of writings. "This is everything?" the bandit asks, his voice betraying confusion. "No money, no hidden valuables?" Ryokan shakes his head with a gentle smile. "I'm afraid not. I live very simply, accepting only what I need for each day. But please, take whatever might be useful to you." The bandit stares at the meager possessions, then at the monk's face. Instead of the fear or anger he's accustomed to seeing, he finds only genuine kindness and concern. This unexpected response begins to crack something hard inside him. "What kind of man are you?" the bandit asks, his voice softer now, the knife lowering slightly. "Aren't you afraid? Don't you want to keep your things?" Ryokan considers the question thoughtfully. "I've learned that the things we cling to most tightly often become the source of our greatest suffering. These possessions serve me when they're needed, but they don't define who I am. If they can serve you better now, then this is where they belong." The bandit looks down at the simple robe and bowl, then back at the monk's face. "But how will you manage without these things? How will you eat? Where will you sleep?" "The same way I managed before I had them," Ryokan replies gently, with trust that each day provides what is truly needed. "I've found that when we release our grip on security, life often supports us in unexpected ways." For a long moment, the two men stand in the forest twilight, the atmosphere having completely transformed from threat to something approaching intimacy. The bandit finds himself looking into the monk's eyes not as a predator studying prey, but as one human being truly seeing another. "You really mean this?" the bandit says, not quite asking. "I do," Ryokan confirms. "But I wonder if I might ask you something in return." The bandit nods, curious. You seem to be in some kind of pain that drives you to this dangerous way of living. If it would help to talk about it, I'm willing to listen." The unexpected offer of compassion breaks through the bandit's hardened exterior. His shoulders slump, and for the first time in years, his face shows vulnerability rather than aggression. "I lost my family to sickness 2 years ago," he begins haltingly. "My wife, both my children. I had a small farm, but couldn't work it properly after they died. Lost it to debts. Since then, I've been surviving however I can." Ryokan listens with complete attention, his face reflecting genuine compassion for this man's suffering. When the bandit finishes, the monk sits down on a fallen log and gestures for him to join him. "Grief can make us feel like we've lost not just our loved ones, but ourselves as well," Ryokan says quietly. "The pain becomes so overwhelming that we'll do anything to avoid feeling it fully. But running from grief is like trying to outrun our own shadow." They sit together in the growing darkness. Two men who moments before were strangers in a potentially violent encounter, now sharing the universal experience of loss and the search for meaning in suffering. "What would your wife want for you?" Ryokan asks gently. "If she could see you now, what do you think she would say?" The bandit is quiet for a long time, tears flowing silently down his weathered cheeks. Finally, he whispers, "She would want me to find a way to live with purpose again. She always said I had a good heart beneath my rough exterior." "Perhaps," Ryokan suggests, "this encounter is life offering you a chance to honor her wisdom. Your heart is indeed good. I can see it clearly. Grief may have hidden it for a while, but it hasn't been destroyed." As the night deepens, the two men continue talking. Ryokan shares teachings about finding meaning in suffering, about how compassion for our own pain can open us to compassion for others. The bandit finds himself remembering who he was before grief consumed him. When dawn breaks, the bandit has made a decision. He helps Ryokan gather the possessions that he no longer wants to take. "Keep these," he says. "You'll need them for your work. I'm going to find a different path." Ryokan smiles. "What will you do? I remember hearing about a village downstream that was flooded last month. They probably need help rebuilding. Maybe I can use my hands for building instead of taking." The monk nods approvingly. The best healing for our own wounds often comes through healing others. As they prepare to part ways, the former bandit bows deeply to Ryokan. "Thank you for seeing who I really am beneath what I had become." "Thank you," Ryokan replies, "for reminding me that compassion is always more powerful than fear." Years later, travelers through that region would hear stories of a man who had once been a bandit but had transformed his life after an encounter with a wise monk. He had indeed gone to the flooded village and had become known for his tireless work, helping families rebuild their homes and lives. As for Ryokan, he continued his simple wandering, carrying the same few possessions and the same boundless compassion for all beings he encountered, showing through his example that true security comes not from what we possess, but from who we choose to be in each moment. Tonight, as you rest, consider where in your life you might be clinging too tightly to security, afraid of loss or change. Notice how Ryokan's willingness to let go with love created space for something beautiful to emerge. Feel your own heart opening to the possibility that generosity and trust might offer deeper security than holding on ever could. Let your body sink deeper into relaxation as you sense the profound peace that comes from releasing our grip on outcomes and resting in the inherent goodness that connects all beings. Your breathing has become deep and rhythmic now, carrying you further into peace. Allow your awareness to travel to a small tea house beside a mountain stream in Japan, where an unusual lesson in wisdom is about to unfold. The tea house is simple but elegant, with paper screens that filter the morning light into a soft glow. The sound of water flowing over stones creates a natural music that seems to slow time itself. Here, an elderly Zen master named Hoshin meets regularly with students and visitors who seek to understand the deeper teachings of Buddhism. This morning, a university professor has come to visit Hoshin. The professor is a distinguished man, well known for his scholarly work on comparative religion. His reputation for intellectual brilliance has earned him recognition around the world, and he has written several books attempting to explain Eastern philosophy to Western minds. The professor arrives carrying a briefcase full of notes and questions, prepared to engage in deep philosophical discussion with the Zen master. He has studied Buddhist texts extensively and feels confident in his ability to understand whatever teachings Hoshin might offer. Hoshin greets the professor with a simple bow and invites him to sit on a cushion beside the low table where tea will be served. The master's demeanor is calm and unhurried, in contrast to the professor's barely contained intellectual energy. "Master Hoshin," the professor begins, settling himself and opening his briefcase, "I've come to learn about authentic Zen teaching. I've read extensively about meditation, enlightenment, and Buddhist philosophy, but I feel there are subtleties that can only be understood through direct contact with a genuine teacher." Hoshin nods respectfully and begins preparing tea with slow, deliberate movements. He arranges the cups, heats the water, and measures the tea leaves with complete attention to each detail. "I'm particularly interested," the professor continues, "in the concept of emptiness as it relates to consciousness. I've studied Nagarjuna's philosophical arguments, compared them with Yogacara teachings, and I believe I understand the basic framework. But I'd like to hear your perspective on how emptiness relates to practical meditation experience." The master continues his tea preparation without responding, his attention apparently completely absorbed in the simple task at hand. When the tea is ready, he lifts the pot and begins pouring into the professor's cup. The professor, pleased to have a moment to collect his thoughts, watches as Hoshin pours the tea. The cup fills with the aromatic green liquid, steam rising gently in the morning air. But then something strange happens. Hoshin continues pouring even after the cup is full. Tea begins to overflow, spilling onto the wooden table and dripping to the floor. Still, the master continues pouring, his face calm and concentrated as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "Master!" the professor exclaims, jumping to his feet. "Stop! The cup is already full. No more tea can go in." Hoshin finally sets down the teapot and looks at the professor with clear, peaceful eyes. "Exactly," he says simply. The professor stares at the overflowing cup, then at the master's serene face, confusion evident in his expression. "I don't understand. What does this have to do with my questions about emptiness and consciousness?" Hoshin gestures toward the spilled tea. "Like this cup, you come to me already full of knowledge, concepts, opinions, and preconceptions about what Zen teaching should be. How can I share anything new with you when there is no space left for fresh understanding?" The professor's mind reels as he processes this simple but profound demonstration. His academic training has taught him to approach new information by relating it to what he already knows, by fitting it into existing frameworks of understanding. But Hoshin is suggesting something entirely different. "Are you saying my knowledge is worthless?" the professor asks, somewhat defensively. "Not worthless," Hoshin replies gently, "but like water already in the cup, it prevents new water from entering. To truly receive new understanding, one must first empty the cup of assumptions about what that understanding will look like." The master begins cleaning up the spilled tea with the same careful attention he gave to preparing it. "Your scholarly work has value in its proper place. But if you want to experience the reality that these concepts point toward, you must be willing to temporarily set aside everything you think you know." The professor sits quietly, watching Hoshin's methodical cleanup. Something in the master's calm certainty begins to affect him, creating a space of doubt in his intellectual confidence. "But how does one empty the cup of knowledge?" the professor asks. "I can't simply forget everything I've studied." Hoshin places the clean cup before him, now genuinely empty. "Watch," he says, and begins pouring fresh tea. This time, the cup receives the liquid completely, with no spillage, no waste. Emptying the cup doesn't mean destroying knowledge, the master explains. It means holding it lightly, being willing to see beyond it. When you sit in meditation, can you set aside your ideas about what meditation should accomplish? When you encounter a teaching, can you hear it fresh without immediately comparing it to what you've read before? The professor considers this, beginning to recognize how his scholarly approach might actually be limiting his direct experience. "You're suggesting that expertise can become a barrier to learning?" "I'm suggesting that true learning requires what we call beginner's mind," Hoshin replies. "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. The empty cup can hold any kind of tea. The full cup can receive nothing new." Over the following hours, the professor experiences something he hasn't felt in years: the excitement of not knowing, the openness that comes from releasing the need to understand everything immediately. Under Hoshin's gentle guidance, he begins to practice simple sitting meditation without trying to analyze or explain the experience. For the first time in decades, the professor allows himself to simply be present without needing to categorize or interpret that presence. The relief is profound. He realizes how exhausting it has been to constantly process every experience through his intellectual frameworks. As the day ends, the professor bows deeply to Hoshin. "Thank you for showing me that the wisdom I've been seeking was being blocked by my very attempts to grasp it intellectually." "The cup is naturally empty," Hoshin responds with a smile. "We only need to remember to pour out what we've accumulated so that fresh tea can be enjoyed." Years later, when the professor speaks about his encounter with Hoshin, he always mentions the overflowing teacup. "That simple demonstration taught me more about the nature of mind than all my years of academic study," he says. Sometimes the most profound wisdom comes through unlearning rather than learning. As you rest now, consider your own cup. What beliefs, assumptions, or fixed ideas might you be holding so tightly that they prevent new understanding from entering? Can you feel the relief that comes from temporarily setting aside the need to know and categorize everything? Tonight, let your mind become like Hoshin's empty cup, spacious, receptive, ready to be filled with the natural peace that emerges when we stop trying so hard to understand and simply allow ourselves to be present with what is. Feel your body growing heavier as you release into this emptiness that is actually fullness, this not knowing that contains all wisdom. As we proceed along our journey, feel how these ancient teachings have begun to work their gentle magic within you. The monastery bell reminds us that our natural state is peaceful awareness, unchanged by the thoughts that come and go. Tenzin's garden shows us the wisdom of accepting life as it unfolds, working skillfully with what arises rather than fighting against it. Ryokan's encounter with the bandit reveals how compassion can transform even the most difficult situations, and how letting go with love creates space for unexpected beauty. Hoshin's empty cup teaches us that true learning often requires releasing what we think we already know, making space for fresh understanding. These stories live now in your heart, not as memories to be remembered, but as seeds of wisdom to grow and flower in their own time. As your breathing continues to slow and deepen, feel yourself drifting toward the threshold of sleep, carried by the peaceful current of ancient wisdom. The next part of our journey will explore how Buddhist teachings guide us in the art of letting go, showing us that freedom comes not from grasping what we want, but from releasing our hold on how we think life should be. These gentle teachings on non-attachment and impermanence will carry you even deeper into rest and understanding. As we continue deeper into this peaceful night of wisdom, feel your body settling even further into comfort. The foundation stories have prepared rich soil in your awareness, and now we explore one of Buddhism's most liberating teachings, the art of letting go. Your breathing naturally slows as we journey into understanding how attachment creates suffering and how release brings freedom. These are not teachings that ask you to care less, but rather to love more freely, without the tight grip of possession that turns joy into anxiety. Let the gentle wisdom of these ancient stories wash over you like a warm stream, carrying away the tensions and grasping that may have accumulated in your heart during the day. Feel yourself walking through the bustling streets of an ancient Tibetan trading town, where merchants from many lands gather to exchange goods and stories. The air carries the scent of yak butter, tea and incense, mixed with the leather of saddlebags and the dust of long journeys. Among the merchants is a man named Tenzin, whose success in trading has made him wealthy beyond his early dreams. His caravans travel the silk routes carrying precious goods between distant lands, and his warehouses are filled with gold, silver, fine silks, and rare spices. By every measure the world recognizes, Tenzin has achieved prosperity and security. But as you observe Tenzin more closely, you notice something troubling beneath his outward success. His eyes dart constantly, checking his goods, counting his coins, watching for threats to his wealth. His shoulders carry a tension that never fully releases, even in sleep. The success he worked so hard to achieve has become a burden that grows heavier each day. One evening, after a particularly profitable trading day, Tenzin sits in his private room counting the day's earnings. Gold coins flow through his fingers like water, their soft clinking usually a sound that brings him satisfaction. But tonight, instead of joy, he feels only a gnawing anxiety about losing what he has gained. Unable to sleep, Tenzin walks through the town's quiet streets until he finds himself at a small monastery on the hillside. Through an open window, he hears the gentle voice of an old lama giving evening teachings to a small group of students. Curious, he approaches and asks permission to listen. The lama, whose name is Jamyang, welcomes the merchant with a warm smile. "Please join us, friend. We were just discussing the nature of true wealth." Tenzin settles himself at the edge of the group, his fine clothes marking him clearly as different from the simply dressed monks and local people gathered around the teacher. Imagine, Jamyang is saying, a man who finds a beautiful golden chain. It gleams in the sunlight, perfectly crafted and obviously valuable. He puts it around his neck and feels proud of his good fortune. The teacher pauses, his eyes twinkling as they briefly meet Tenzin's. But this man does not realize that the chain, though made of gold, is also forged with invisible links of worry. Each day he wears it, he becomes more concerned about losing it, about others stealing it, about it breaking or tarnishing. Tenzin shifts uncomfortably, feeling as if the Lama is speaking directly to him. Soon, Jamyang continues, the man's life revolves around protecting his chain. He cannot sleep peacefully for fear of thieves. He cannot travel freely because he might lose it. He cannot enjoy simple pleasures because his mind is always focused on his precious possession. One of the students asks, "But teacher, surely beautiful things can bring joy. The chain is genuinely valuable." "Ah," the Lama nods. "This is the subtle trap. The chain itself is neither good nor bad. Gold has its uses and beauty. The problem lies not in having the chain, but in the chain having him. When we grasp our possessions so tightly that we become their prisoners, then our treasures become our jailers." Tenzin feels his heart racing as he recognizes himself in this teaching. His wealth, earned through years of hard work and careful planning, has indeed become a prison. Every gold coin in his counting room represents not just value, but worry. Each profitable trade brings not just success, but increased fear of loss. After the teaching ends, Tenzin approaches Jamyang privately. "Venerable teacher," he says, his voice heavy with emotion, "I fear you were speaking directly about my life tonight. I have worked for 20 years to build my wealth, but now I find that my possessions possess me more than I possess them. Yet I cannot simply give everything away. I have responsibilities, employees who depend on me. How does one find freedom without abandoning duty?" The Lama regards him with compassionate eyes. "Tell me, friend, when you hold water in your cupped hands, what happens if you grip too tightly?" Tenzin considers this. "The water flows out through the spaces between my fingers. And if you hold your hands too loosely, the water flows out just the same. But if you hold your hands just right, neither grasping nor careless, then the water stays, and I can drink or offer it to others." Jamyang nods approvingly. "This is the wisdom you seek. The art of holding your wealth lightly enough that it remains fluid and useful, but not so tightly that it becomes stagnant and burdensome." Over the following weeks, Tenzin visits the monastery regularly, learning to practice meditation and study the teachings on non-attachment. Slowly, he begins to understand that letting go doesn't mean having less. It means being free to enjoy what he has without being enslaved by it. He starts making changes in how he conducts his business. Instead of hoarding profits out of fear of future lack, he begins sharing more generously with his workers and supporting community projects. Rather than expanding his business out of greed, he focuses on conducting trade with integrity and fairness. Most surprisingly, these changes don't reduce his prosperity, they enhance it. Employees work more loyally when treated generously. Customers trust him more when they see his genuine care for fairness. His reputation grows not just for shrewd dealing, but for ethical conduct. More importantly, Tenzin rediscovers the joy of simple pleasures he had forgotten in his anxious pursuit of more. He takes time to appreciate the sunset over the mountains, to share unhurried meals with friends, to listen to music without constantly calculating profit and loss in the back of his mind. One evening, months later, Tenzin sits with Jamyang, watching stars emerge in the clear mountain sky. The merchant's face has changed, the lines of constant worry have softened, replaced by a peaceful alertness to the beauty around him. "I understand now," Tenzin says quietly, "that the golden chain was never really the problem. The problem was my belief that holding it tightly would make me secure. In trying to grasp security, I lost the very peace I was trying to protect." "And now?" Jamyang asks gently. Tenzin smiles, his whole being more relaxed than it has been in years. "Now I wear my wealth like a loose garment, comfortable when needed, but never binding. My business continues, my responsibilities are met, but I am no longer possessed by my possessions." The Lama nods. This is the freedom that comes from understanding impermanence. When we truly accept that everything changes, that nothing can be held onto forever, we can enjoy what comes our way without the suffering that comes from grasping. Years later, Tenzin becomes known not just as a successful merchant, but as a man of unusual wisdom and generosity. Younger traders seek his advice not just about commerce, but about finding balance between worldly success and inner peace. He always tells them about the golden chain, how the most precious things in life become prisons when we hold them too tightly, and how true freedom comes from learning to hold everything, even our greatest treasures, with an open hand. Tonight, as you rest, consider what golden chains you might be wearing. What possessions, relationships, or achievements have you been grasping so tightly that they've become sources of anxiety rather than joy? Feel the relief that comes from imagining holding them more lightly, with trust rather than fear. Let your breathing deepen as you sense the freedom that comes from releasing the tight grip of ownership, allowing life's gifts to flow through your hands like water, staying when needed, flowing onward when their time has passed. Your body continues to grow heavier with each breath as we travel now to a small tea house where an aged Zen master named Rikyu prepares for his daily tea ceremony. This is not the elaborate tea ceremony known to the wealthy, but a simple, mindful preparation of tea that has been his practice for 50 years. The room is spare but beautiful, with paper screens filtering gentle light and a single scroll hanging in the alcove. On a wooden shelf sits Rikyu's most treasured possession, a tea bowl that has been in his family for generations. The bowl is not flashy or ornate, but it holds perfect proportions, its glaze the subtle color of autumn leaves. This bowl has been with Rikyu through all the seasons of his life. He drank his first tea as a young student from this bowl, shared countless moments of contemplation with it in his hands, and offered tea to visitors from its humble depths. It has become, in a way, an extension of his own practice, a silent witness to decades of mindful presence. Today, Rikyu's young apprentice, Koji, watches as the master prepares tea with his usual careful attention. Every movement is deliberate but not forced, every gesture arising from years of practice that has made the complex simple. As Rikyu lifts his beloved bowl, filled with perfectly prepared tea, his aged hands tremble slightly. This is new. His grip, once sure and steady, has begun to betray the advancing years. The bowl slips from his fingers and falls to the wooden floor with a soft crash. Koji gasps and rushes forward, expecting to see his master devastated by the loss of his treasured possession. The bowl lies in several pieces, its centuries-old beauty ended in an instant. Any repair would leave visible scars, changing its character forever. But as Koji looks at Rikyu's face, he sees something completely unexpected. Instead of grief or anger, the master's expression holds a peaceful wonder, as if he's witnessing something beautiful rather than tragic. Rikyu kneels beside the broken pieces, picking up each fragment with the same careful attention he gave to the intact bowl. His fingers trace the fractured edges, and to Koji's amazement, a gentle smile spreads across the old man's face. "Master," Koji says hesitantly, "I'm so sorry about your bowl. It was such a precious thing, and now..." Rikyu looks up at his young student with eyes full of quiet joy. "Koji, come and sit with me. Let me share with you what this broken bowl has just taught me." Confused but obedient, Koji settles beside his teacher, who arranges the fragments carefully on the floor between them. "For 50 years, Rikyu begins, his voice soft with wonder, "I have loved this bowl and believed I understood its nature. I cherished its beauty, honored its history, and found peace in its presence. But I realize now that I only knew half of its truth." He picks up one of the larger pieces, turning it in his hands with the same reverence he once showed the whole bowl. "I knew its beauty in wholeness, but not its beauty in brokenness. I knew its form in permanence, but not its teaching in change. This bowl has been my teacher for decades, but today it gave me its greatest lesson." Koji frowns, trying to understand. "But Master, surely the bowl was more beautiful when it was whole. Now it's just broken." Rikyu chuckles softly, the sound carrying no trace of sadness. "Tell me, Koji, when you look at these pieces, what do you see?" The young man looks at the fragments. "I see something that was whole and beautiful, now destroyed." "Look again," Rikyu encourages gently. "Not with your memory of what was, but with fresh eyes at what is." Koji looks more carefully at the broken pieces spread before them. Slowly, his perspective begins to shift. The fractured edges create new patterns of light and shadow. Each piece has its own unique shape, its own particular beauty that was hidden when they were joined together. "I see." Koji begins slowly. "I see that each piece has its own character now. The way the light catches the broken edge there, the curve of this fragment here, it's different from what it was, but it's not without beauty." "Yes," Rikyu nods approvingly. "And what else?" Koji studies the fragments more deeply. "The bowl that I knew was always changing, wasn't it? Every time we used it, every wash, every touch of our hands was slowly changing it. I just couldn't see those changes because they were so gradual." "Exactly. This bowl has been teaching us about impermanence every day, but we could only hear the lesson when it spoke loudly enough, in breaking, to catch our attention." The master gathers the pieces gently, placing them in a wooden box. "For 50 years, I loved this bowl's temporary form. But I was also, without realizing it, suffering from the fear of losing that form. Every time I lifted it, part of my mind worried about dropping it. Every guest who used it made me slightly anxious about possible damage." He closes the box tenderly. "Now that fear is gone. The thing I was afraid of losing has been lost, and instead of devastation, I find freedom. I am released from the anxiety of protecting what cannot be protected forever." Koji begins to understand something profound. So the bowl's breaking was not a tragedy, but a completion of its teaching? In a way, yes. Everything in this world has the nature of breaking, changing, passing away. When we try to hold on to temporary forms as if they were permanent, we create suffering for ourselves. But when we can appreciate the beauty in each moment of a thing's existence, including its moment of change or ending, we find a deeper peace. Rikyu stands and begins preparing tea using a simple, plain bowl from his shelf. His movements are even more graceful than before, completely free from the subtle tension that comes from protecting something precious. "Will you miss the old bowl?" Koji asks. "I am grateful for every moment it graced my practice," Rikyu replies, pouring tea with serene attention. "But missing it would mean I hadn't fully received its gifts. It taught me mindfulness for 50 years, and then it taught me non-attachment in a single moment. How could I ask for a more perfect teacher?" As they share tea from the simple bowl, Koji notices that his master's presence has a new quality, lighter somehow, as if a weight has been lifted that he didn't even know he was carrying. "Master," Koji says, "will you repair the broken bowl?" Rikyu considers this question thoughtfully. "Perhaps I will practice the art of kintsugi, joining the pieces with gold, making the breaks part of its beauty rather than trying to hide them. But if I do, it will be to create something new, not to desperately restore what was lost." Years later, when visitors ask about the beautiful bowl with golden veins that sits in a place of honor in the tea house, Rikyu tells them the story of the day his favorite cup taught him its greatest lesson. "That bowl," he always says with a smile, "was never more beautiful than in the moment it let go of the form I had grown attached to." As you rest tonight, gently consider what precious things in your life you might be holding with anxiety rather than appreciation. Can you sense how the fear of losing something actually diminishes your ability to enjoy it fully? Feel the lightness that comes from appreciating the temporary beauty of all things without needing to grasp them forever. Let your breathing slow as you imagine holding your treasures like Rikyu learned to hold his bowl with gratitude for their presence, acceptance of their impermanence, and readiness to find beauty even in their changing. Feel your awareness drifting deeper now, like sinking into warm water. Let your mind travel to a small farming village nestled in a valley surrounded by gentle hills. The villagers here have worked the same land for generations, their lives flowing with the natural rhythms of planting, tending, and harvesting. Among these farmers is a man named Chen, whose rice fields have provided for his family through many seasons. Chen is known for his dedication to the land and his skill in reading the subtle signs that tell him when to plant, when to water, and when to harvest. His neighbors often seek his advice, and his family has never known hunger. But this year brings an unprecedented challenge. The monsoon rains that usually arrive like clockwork have failed to come. Week after week passes with clear skies that would normally be a blessing but now mock the increasingly dry earth. At first, Chen responds as he always has to challenges, with increased effort. He carries water from the distant stream, making trip after trip with heavy buckets until his back aches and his hands are raw. He adjusts his planting patterns, chooses more drought-resistant seeds, and studies the sky constantly for any sign of approaching rain. As weeks become months, Chen's anxiety grows along with his efforts. He rises before dawn and works past sunset, trying through sheer determination to force his usual harvest from the unwilling earth. His wife, May, watches her husband growing thin and hollow-eyed, pouring all his strength into fighting against circumstances beyond anyone's control. The other farmers in the village respond differently to the drought. Some, like Chen, fight harder against the conditions. Others fall into despair, sitting in their houses and lamenting their fate. But one farmer, an elderly man named Lao Jiang, responds in a way that puzzles everyone. Lao Jiang spends his mornings doing the essential work, carrying what water he can to his most vital crops, caring for his animals, maintaining his tools. But instead of working frantically all day like Chen, or despairing like some others, Lao Jiang spends his afternoons sitting peacefully under an old tree, sometimes reading, sometimes just watching the sky with calm attention. Chen finds this behavior infuriating. One evening, unable to contain his frustration any longer, he confronts the old farmer. "Jiang," Chen says, his voice tight with exhaustion and stress, "how can you sit there so peacefully when our crops are dying? Don't you care about your family's future? We all must work harder to overcome this disaster." Lao Jiang looks at Chen with kind eyes that hold deep understanding. "My friend," he says gently, "sit with me for a moment. Let me share something I learned from the great drought of my youth." Despite his agitation, something in the old man's peaceful presence compels Chen to sit beside him under the tree. From here, they can see both Chen's fields, where the young farmer has been fighting tirelessly against the drought, and Zhang's fields, which look surprisingly healthy, despite receiving no more rain than anyone else's. 40 years ago, Zhang begins, a drought came that lasted 2 full seasons. I was young then, like you now, and I responded exactly as you are responding, with desperation and furious effort. I worked myself to exhaustion trying to force the land to give what it could not give. Chen nods, recognizing himself in this description. By the end of that first season, Zhang continues, I had made myself sick with worry and overwork. My family was suffering not just from crop failure, but from my constant anxiety and anger. I was fighting against the drought as if it were a personal enemy that could be defeated through rage and effort. The old farmer pauses, watching a bird settle in the branches above them. Then an old monk passed through our village. He saw me collapsing in my field from exhaustion and dehydration, and he helped me to the shade. When I told him angrily about the injustice of the drought, about how hard I had worked and how little it had accomplished, he said something that changed my understanding forever. What did he say? Chen asks, his curiosity overcoming his agitation. He said, Young man, you are trying to make the sky rain through anger. But the sky has never learned to respond to human demands. It follows laws much older and deeper than our desires. What if you worked with the drought instead of against it? Chen frowns. Work with the drought? That makes no sense. Drought is our enemy. It destroys crops and threatens our families. Zhang smiles patiently. That's exactly what I thought. But the monk asked me to consider what the drought might be trying to teach, what opportunities it might be offering that I couldn't see while I was busy fighting it. The old farmer gestures toward his fields. So I began to observe the drought with curiosity instead of hatred. I noticed which plants survived with minimal water, which practices conserved moisture most effectively, which timing of activities worked best in the changed conditions. More importantly, Zhang continues, I noticed how my fighting against the drought was making everything worse. My anxiety was affecting my judgment. I made poor decisions because I was acting from fear instead of wisdom. My anger was poisoning my relationships with neighbors when we needed to support each other most. Chen looks around the village, recognizing the truth in this observation. The farmers who are fighting most desperately against the drought seem also to be the most isolated, the most difficult to live with. So what did you do differently? Chen asks. I began to practice what the monk called flowing like water. Instead of trying to force my usual farming methods to work in impossible conditions, I adapted my approach to the reality of what was. I focused my limited water on my most essential crops instead of trying to save everything. I learned preservation techniques I had never needed before. Zhang points to a section of his field where different plants grow in careful arrangement. I discovered that some crops actually thrive in drier conditions, producing flavors and medicines that aren't available in wet years. I learned to see the drought not as pure disaster, but as a different kind of season with its own gifts and challenges. Chen stares at the thriving plants, then at his own struggling fields. But what about accepting failure? What about the crops that will certainly be lost? Accepting what cannot be changed freed my energy to work skillfully with what could be influenced, Zhang replies. Instead of exhausting myself in futile battles, I could focus on creative solutions. Instead of making my family miserable with constant worry, I could offer them calm leadership during a difficult time. As evening light fades around them, Chen feels something shifting in his understanding. The tight knot of anxiety in his chest begins to loosen slightly. The drought will end when it ends, Zhang continues. My fighting it will not bring rain one day sooner, 0. 5. But my working skillfully within its conditions can minimize the damage and even discover new possibilities. Most importantly, I can choose whether this challenging season makes me bitter and exhausted or wise and resilient. Over the following weeks, Chen gradually changes his approach. He still works hard, but his efforts become more focused and strategic rather than desperate. He seeks advice from neighbors instead of isolating himself in prideful struggle. He experiments with new techniques suggested by the conditions rather than trying to force old methods to work. Most remarkably, Chen begins to find moments of appreciation even within the difficult circumstances. The clarity of the drought sky reveals stars he had never noticed. The simplified farm work allows more time for conversation with his children. The challenge brings out creative problem-solving abilities he didn't know he possessed. When the rains finally return, Chen's harvest is smaller than in normal years, but his family is well fed and his relationships are stronger than ever. He has learned skills and developed resilience that will serve him through future challenges of all kinds. Years later, when young farmers face their own difficult seasons, Chen shares the wisdom he learned from Lao Zhang. There are circumstances we cannot change and circumstances we can influence. Wisdom lies in distinguishing between them, accepting what cannot be changed with grace, and working skillfully with what can be transformed. Tonight, as you rest, gently consider what droughts you might be fighting in your own life. What circumstances are you struggling against that might be beyond your control? Can you sense how the struggle itself might be creating additional suffering beyond what the situation requires? Feel your body releasing tension as you imagine flowing like water around obstacles instead of fighting them directly. Sometimes, the greatest victory comes not from conquering challenges, but from learning to dance gracefully with whatever conditions life presents. Let your breathing deepen as you rest in the wisdom of acceptance, knowing that even the most difficult seasons have their own teachings to offer when we approach them with openness rather than resistance. As your awareness drifts ever deeper into peaceful rest, travel now to a great library in ancient China, where scrolls and books contain the accumulated wisdom of centuries. Here, among towering shelves and quiet reading alcoves, lives a scholar named Wei who has dedicated his entire life to the pursuit of knowledge. Wei's reputation for learning extends throughout the kingdom. He has memorized countless classical texts, mastered several languages, and written commentaries that other scholars study with reverence. His personal collection of books and scrolls is said to be among the finest in the land, gathered through decades of careful acquisition. The library where Wei works is his sanctuary, every volume precisely organized, every text a treasured companion in his intellectual journey. He knows the location of each scroll, the particular insights contained in every commentary, the subtle differences between various editions of classical works. But Wei's relationship with his books has gradually transformed from love into obsession. He finds himself constantly worried about their preservation, spending hours each day checking for signs of damage, insects, or deterioration. He has become increasingly reluctant to lend books to other scholars, fearing they might be damaged or not returned. More troubling still, Wei realizes that his vast knowledge has begun to feel like a burden rather than a joy. Every new text he encounters must be compared to what he already knows, analyzed for its place in his elaborate mental framework, integrated into his existing understanding. The simple pleasure of discovery has been replaced by the anxious need to possess and categorize every piece of information. One day, a fire breaks out in the quarter of the city where Wei's library is located. Despite the best efforts of the fire brigade, the flames spread quickly through the wooden buildings. Wei watches in horror as his life's work, his precious books, his irreplaceable scrolls, his carefully crafted commentaries disappears into smoke and ash. The loss is complete. Nothing remains of his magnificent collection except a few volumes he happened to have with him when the fire started. 30 years of gathering, organizing, and preserving knowledge has been undone in a single afternoon. Wei's fellow scholars expect him to be devastated, and indeed, his initial shock is profound. But as the days pass, something unexpected happens. Instead of falling into despair, Wei begins to experience a lightness he hasn't felt in years. Walking through the ruins of his library, Wei encounters an old Buddhist monk who has come to offer comfort to those who lost their homes and possessions in the fire. The monk, whose name is Huineng, sits peacefully among the ashes, his simple presence somehow soothing to those who approach. "Master," Wei says, settling beside the monk, "I should be devastated by this loss, but instead I find myself feeling oddly free. Does this mean I never really loved my books? Was my scholarship meaningless?" Huineng looks at Wei with gentle understanding. "Tell me about your relationship with your books before the fire." Wei considers this question carefully. "At first, I loved them purely. Each text was a doorway to new understanding, each scroll a conversation with a great mind across time. Learning felt like exploring an infinite garden of wisdom. And later, I began to feel I owned the books rather than simply enjoying them. I became anxious about losing them, protective about sharing them. Instead of opening doors to wisdom, they became walls that separated me from other scholars. Instead of expanding my mind, my knowledge began to feel like a prison." The monk nods. "The fire has shown you the difference between true learning and mere accumulation. What remains of your scholarship now that the books are gone?" Wei looks around at the ashes, then back at his own hands, his own mind. "The insights I've gained remain. The wisdom I've internalized through years of study is still here. The ability to think clearly, to understand complex ideas, to help others learn, none of that was destroyed by the fire. And what was lost? The burden of ownership," Wei realizes with growing wonder. "The anxiety about preservation, the pride of possession, the need to defend my collection as if it defined who I am. The fire burned away everything that was not essential, leaving only what truly matters." Huineng smiles. "Books are like fingers pointing at the moon. They serve their purpose when they direct our attention to wisdom itself. But if we become so fascinated with the fingers that we forget to look at the moon, they become obstacles rather than aids. Over the following months, Wei rebuilds his scholarly practice with a completely different approach. Instead of trying to recreate his lost library, he focuses on sharing the knowledge he has internalized. He begins teaching students, writing down key insights from memory, and collaborating with other scholars in ways his previous possessiveness had prevented. Wei discovers that knowledge shared grows rather than diminishes. Every student he teaches becomes a living library, carrying forward wisdom that no fire can destroy. Every collaborative project creates understanding that belongs to the community rather than to any individual collector. Most remarkably, Wei finds that his scholarship deepens without the burden of ownership. Free from the need to possess and protect texts, he can engage with ideas more fluidly, more creatively. He begins to make connections and develop insights that his previous systematic approach had actually hindered. When other scholars ask about his transformation, Wei often takes them to the site where his library once stood, now rebuilt as a community garden. "I learned," he tells them, "that the greatest treasures are those that increase when shared and cannot be destroyed by external circumstances. True knowledge lives not in books we own, but in wisdom we embody." Real scholarship is not about accumulating information, but about becoming the kind of person who can think clearly and help others understand. He pauses, watching children play among the flowers that now grow where his books once gathered dust. "The fire took my collection, but gave me back my true calling, not to hoard wisdom, but to cultivate it, not to own knowledge, but to serve it." Years later, scholars speak of Wei not as the man who lost a great library, but as the teacher whose wisdom seemed to flow endlessly from an inexhaustible inner source. His students, scattered across the kingdom, carry forward his insights in ways that no physical collection ever could. Tonight, as you rest, consider what you might be holding too tightly in your own life. What knowledge, skills, or achievements have you been grasping as possessions rather than enjoying as flowing gifts? Can you feel the freedom that might come from holding your treasures more lightly, ready to share them generously rather than protect them anxiously? Let your breathing slow as you imagine your own mind as a library where wisdom flows freely, where insights are shared rather than hoarded, where the joy of learning matters more than the pride of knowing. In this space of generosity, true understanding can flourish without the weight of ownership. As this exploration of letting go draws to a close, notice how these teachings on non-attachment have been working silently within you. Tenzin's golden chain reminds us that our treasures become prisons when we grasp them too tightly. Master Rikyu's broken teacup shows us how even loss can become a teacher when we meet it with acceptance rather than resistance. Chen's drought reveals the wisdom of flowing like water around obstacles we cannot change, while Wei's library fire demonstrates how our greatest treasures are those that grow when shared rather than diminish when lost. Feel how your body has grown naturally heavier as these stories settled into your awareness, each teaching releasing another layer of tension you may not have known you were carrying. The art of letting go is not about caring less, but about loving more freely, without the anxiety that comes from trying to hold onto what is naturally flowing. As your breathing continues to deepen, we prepare to journey into the heart of Buddhist wisdom, the recognition of our fundamental interconnection with all life. These teachings on compassion and loving kindness will carry you even deeper into rest, showing how opening our hearts actually provides the greatest security of all. The seeds of non-attachment that have been planted tonight will continue growing in the rich soil of your dreams, bearing fruit in ways you don't need to understand or direct. 5. Simply rest now in the spacious peace that comes when we release our tight grip on how we think life should be, trusting the natural wisdom that knows how to care without clinging, how to love without possessing. Feel yourself drifting toward the threshold of even deeper rest, carried by the gentle current of ancient wisdom that flows through all seeking hearts. As we continue deeper into this night of gentle wisdom, your body naturally settles into profound relaxation. The teachings on letting go have created space in your heart, and now we explore how that space fills naturally with compassion, not as something we must force, but as something that flows when we remove the barriers that block it. Feel your breathing slowing even further as we discover how the recognition of our deep interconnection with all beings transforms not only how we relate to others, but how we experience ourselves. These ancient stories reveal that compassion is not weakness, but the greatest strength. Not giving away what we need, but discovering an inexhaustible source of well-being. Let these timeless teachings wash through you like a gentle stream, carrying away any remaining tension and replacing it with the profound peace that comes from knowing we are never truly alone. Feel yourself walking beside a slow-moving river in ancient India, where the morning light dances on gentle waters and lotus flowers bloom in quiet backwaters. Here, where the Buddha himself once walked, a monk named Ananda makes his way to a favorite spot for morning meditation. Ananda is known throughout the region, not for scholarly learning or mystical experiences, but for his inexhaustible kindness toward all living beings. Children follow him through village streets, because he always has time to listen to their stories. Merchants trust him because they've never known him to speak harshly even when bargaining. Even animals seem to sense his gentle nature and approach without fear. This morning, as Ananda settles beneath a banyan tree for meditation, he hears a faint splashing from the river. Looking toward the sound, he sees a small creature struggling in the water near the bank. It's a scorpion that has somehow fallen in and is drowning, its tiny legs thrashing desperately against the current. Without hesitation, Ananda rises and wades into the shallow water. He reaches down to lift the scorpion to safety, but as his fingers close around the small creature, it stings him sharply on the palm. The sudden pain causes him to jerk his hand back, and the scorpion falls back into the water. Ananda looks at his stung hand, already beginning to swell, but shows no anger or frustration. Instead, he reaches down again to save the drowning creature. Once again, the frightened scorpion stings him, this time on the wrist, and once again falls back into the river. By now, a small crowd has gathered on the riverbank, drawn by the unusual scene. Among them is a merchant who has been watching Ananda's repeated attempts with growing irritation. "Monk!" the merchant calls out. "What's wrong with you? That scorpion has stung you twice, and you keep trying to save it. It's just a worthless creature that will probably sting someone else later. Let it drown and save yourself the pain." Ananda pauses in the water, looking at the merchant with gentle eyes. "Friend," he replies calmly, "the scorpion is following its nature by stinging when it feels threatened. Should I abandon my nature of compassion because the scorpion follows its nature of self-defense?" He reaches down a third time toward the struggling creature. "If I become cruel because others act according to their nature, then I have lost what makes me who I am. The scorpion cannot help being a scorpion, but I can choose whether to remain true to the path of compassion." This time, using a large leaf to protect his hands, Ananda successfully lifts the scorpion from the water and gently places it on the dry bank. The small creature, exhausted but alive, crawls slowly away into the grass. The merchant stares in amazement as Ananda wades back to shore, his hands swollen from the stings but his face serene. "I don't understand," the merchant says. "That creature showed you no gratitude. It hurt you when you tried to help. How can you call this wisdom?" Ananda settles back beneath the banyan tree, cradling his injured hands with tenderness rather than anger. "Tell me, friend, if you saw a child drowning in this river, would you save her?" "Of course," the merchant replies immediately. "And if, in her panic, she scratched your face or bit your hand while you pulled her to safety, would you throw her back into the water?" "No, of course not. She would be acting from fear, not understanding that I was trying to help." "Then you understand perfectly," Ananda smiles. That scorpion was no different from the frightened child. It acted from the fear and confusion that all beings experience when they feel threatened. My compassion is not conditional on receiving gratitude or understanding in return. One of the other observers, a young man who has been listening intently, steps forward. "But Master, surely there are beings so harmful that they don't deserve our compassion. What about those who choose to do evil?" Ananda looks thoughtfully at his swollen hands, then at the young man. "Do you see these stings as the scorpion's evil or as its nature when frightened?" "As its nature, I suppose. Most of what we call evil in humans comes from the same source: fear, pain, confusion, or ignorance about what truly brings happiness. When someone acts harmfully, they are usually trying, in their misguided way, to find security or peace or love." The monk gently touches the spots where he was stung, his expression remaining peaceful. This doesn't mean we should let harmful actions continue unchecked. Sometimes compassion requires setting boundaries, protecting others, or even restraining someone who is causing damage. But we can do this without hatred in our hearts. An elderly woman in the gathering nods slowly. "You're saying we can oppose harmful actions while still caring about the person performing them?" "Exactly. A mother might firmly stop her child from running into traffic, but her intervention comes from love, not hatred of the child. In the same way, we can work to prevent harm in the world while maintaining compassion for all beings, including those who act unskillfully." As the crowd disperses, many carrying away new understanding, the young man remains with Ananda. "Master, how do you cultivate such endless compassion? Don't you ever feel angry or want to protect yourself first?" Ananda looks out over the river where he saved the scorpion. "I used to believe that I had a limited amount of compassion to share, like coins in a purse that would run out if I spent too freely. But I've discovered that compassion is more like the water in this river. The more it flows, the more it flows." "I don't understand." When we act with genuine compassion, we don't lose anything. Instead, we discover that our capacity for love grows. Each time I choose compassion over resentment, kindness over irritation, my heart becomes more capable of love, not less. The monk stands, his stung hands no longer causing him visible discomfort. "The scorpion taught me today that my compassion must not depend on the responses I receive. True compassion flows not because others deserve it by our judgment, but because compassion is our nature when we remove the obstacles that block it." Years later, when people in the region tell the story of Ananda and the scorpion, they always emphasize how the monk's face remained peaceful throughout the entire incident. Those who were there say that watching his unwavering kindness toward the creature that stung him changed something fundamental in how they understood what it means to be human. The story spreads beyond that region, becoming a teaching that generations of students contemplate. They learn that compassion is not naive softness, but the strength to remain true to our deepest nature, regardless of how others behave. Like Ananda's river, it flows continuously, nourishing all life, whether that life appears grateful or hostile, beautiful or frightening. As you rest tonight, consider where in your life you might be withholding compassion because others haven't responded as you hoped. Can you sense how this withholding actually hurts you more than it protects you? Feel the relief that comes from imagining your heart as vast as Ananda's river, able to flow with love regardless of what flows back to you. Let your breathing deepen as you rest in the understanding that true compassion is not depleted by giving, but actually grows stronger each time you choose love over fear, kindness over defense, understanding over judgment. Feel your awareness drifting deeper now, like settling into a warm, peaceful lake. Let your mind travel to a remote mountain village where ancient grievances have poisoned relationships between neighbors for generations. Here, old wounds fester like infected thorns, and the simple act of walking to the market can trigger conflicts that trace their roots back decades. Into this troubled place comes a wandering monk named Thich Min, whose reputation for healing bitter disputes has reached even these isolated mountains. The village elders have invited him reluctantly, more from desperation than faith, after their own attempts to restore peace have failed repeatedly. Thich Min arrives during the worst possible time, the anniversary of a conflict that split the village into two hostile camps. 30 years earlier, a boundary dispute between two families over water rights escalated into accusations of theft, then violence, then a blood feud that gradually pulled in every household, forcing people to choose sides. By now, the original dispute has been forgotten by many, but the hatred has taken on a life of its own. Children grow up learning to despise neighbors they've never spoken to. Simple disagreements about village decisions explode into shouting matches that reference grievances from decades past. The community that once worked together to survive harsh mountain winters now splinters its energy into endless feuds. When Thich Min enters the village, he's met with immediate suspicion from both factions. Each side assumes he must be allied with their enemies, and neither trusts him to understand the complexity of their grievances. The elders who invited him warn that he should probably leave quickly if he values his safety. But instead of addressing the feuding groups directly, Thich Min does something unexpected. He finds the village well, the one source of water that everyone must use regardless of their factional loyalties, and begins cleaning it. Working alone with quiet concentration, he removes debris that has accumulated over the years of neglect. He scrubs the stones, clears the channels, and repairs the simple mechanism that draws water from the depths. People from both sides of the village watch him suspiciously, but no one interferes with work that benefits everyone. As he works, Thich Min begins speaking, though not to any particular person or group. His voice carries clearly across the small valley, but he seems to be addressing the wind, the mountains, the ancient stones of the well itself. This well has been here for 200 years, he says, continuing his patient cleaning. It has served every family in this village, their parents and grandparents. In times of drought, it has saved lives. In times of plenty, it has been a place where neighbors met and children played. He pauses to examine a worn stone, tracing with his fingers the marks left by countless ropes, drawing countless buckets to the surface. The well doesn't choose which family deserves its water. It doesn't remember old arguments or take sides in disputes. It simply offers what it has to anyone who approaches with respect and need. Several villagers have drawn closer, ostensibly to get water, but actually to hear the strange monk's words. I wonder, Thich Minh continues, what this well might teach us about the nature of nourishment. Water taken from here becomes part of every person in the village, regardless of their family name or their grievances. The same water that flows in your body flows in your neighbor's body. How can we be enemies when we are made of the same substance? An old man from one faction mutters loudly enough for others to hear, easy words from someone who doesn't know our history. This monk hasn't lived with the treachery and betrayals we've endured. Thich Minh looks up from his work, his eyes meeting the old man's with genuine interest rather than defense. You're absolutely right, grandfather. I don't know your specific history, and I won't pretend that your pain isn't real or justified. Will you teach me about it? The unexpected invitation disarms the old man's aggression. Instead of an argument, he finds himself telling the story of how his family's sheep were stolen 30 years ago, how his accusations were dismissed, how he was humiliated in front of the entire village. As he speaks, other voices join in, first supporting his version, then challenging it, then adding details from their own perspectives. Soon, people from both sides are gathered around the well, all talking at once, each trying to make their case to the patient monk. Thich Minh listens to it all without taking sides, without judging who is right or wrong. He simply receives each story with the same attention he gave to cleaning the well, thorough, respectful, caring. When the cacophony finally dies down, he sits quietly for several minutes, allowing the silence to settle like dust after a windstorm. I hear so much pain in these stories, he finally says. Pain from feeling wronged, pain from being misunderstood, pain from losing trust in your neighbors. And I notice that everyone's pain sounds remarkably similar, regardless of which side they're on. A woman from the opposing faction speaks up angrily. How can you say our pain is the same? They started this. They've been nothing but trouble for 30 years. I'm not saying your experiences are identical, Thich Minh replies gently. I'm observing that the experience of feeling wronged, of losing trust, of believing others don't understand your perspective, these feelings are universal. The ache in your heart when you feel betrayed is the same ache your neighbors feel when they believe they've been betrayed. He gestures to the clean water now flowing freely from the well. Just as you all share the same water source, you all share the same basic human experiences, the need to be understood, the desire to be treated fairly, the wish to live in peace with your neighbors. These needs don't disappear when conflicts arise. They actually become more urgent. Over the following days, Thich Minh continues his work around the village, always finding projects that serve everyone rather than any particular faction. He repairs the bridge that both sides use to reach their fields. He clears paths that benefit all travelers. He tends sick children regardless of their family allegiances. And always, as he works, he speaks, not giving lectures or moral instructions, but simply sharing observations about human nature, about the universality of suffering, about the possibility of healing even the deepest wounds. Gradually, something begins to shift in the village atmosphere. People start seeing Thich Minh's work and wondering why they've been so focused on protecting their own interests that they've neglected projects that could help everyone. Children, who naturally gravitate toward the kind monk, begin playing together across factional lines for the first time in years. The turning point comes when a late-season storm damages several houses on both sides of the village divide. Traditionally, Each faction would help only their own members, jealously guarding their resources and labor. But as people assess the damage, they realize that Thich Minh's month of patient example has planted seeds of broader perspective. An elder from one family quietly begins helping repair a roof belonging to their supposed enemies. A woman who hasn't spoken to her neighbor in 15 years offers to share her food while the neighbor's kitchen is being rebuilt. These small acts of crossing boundaries spread like ripples from a stone thrown in still water. Soon, the division between helpers and recipients no longer follows the old factional lines, but simply reflects who needs help and who can provide it. When the storm repairs are complete, the village looks different, not just physically, but spiritually. People are still cautious, still carrying scars from decades of conflict, but something fundamental has loosened in the communal heart. Before leaving, Thich Minh gathers the village around the clean, flowing well for a final teaching. "I'm not naive enough to believe that 1 month can erase 30 years of hurt," he tells them. Healing deep wounds takes time, patience, and courage from everyone involved. But I've watched you rediscover something that was never actually lost, your capacity to care for each other across the lines that seem to divide you. He draws a bucket of water from the well, offering cups to everyone present. This water doesn't know which of you it will nourish. It doesn't carry grudges or remember old disputes. It simply offers life to anyone who will receive it. You have that same capacity to nourish life in your community regardless of past conflicts. As people share the water, some drinking from the same cup as neighbors they had considered enemies that morning, the symbolism is not lost on anyone. Years later, travelers passing through the mountain village often comment on the unusual harmony they observe, not the artificial peace of suppressed conflict, but the mature cooperation of people who have learned to work together despite their differences. When asked about this transformation, villagers inevitably tell the story of the monk who came during their darkest time and taught them to see their shared humanity by cleaning their common well. Tonight, as you rest deeply, consider what wells you might share with those you consider different from yourself, the same needs for understanding, safety, love, and meaning that flow through all human hearts. Can you feel how recognizing this shared source might transform conflicts that seem insurmountable? Let your breathing slow as you rest in the understanding that what divides us is often far less significant than what connects us. That healing ancient wounds begins with the willingness to see our shared humanity beneath surface differences. As you drift even deeper into peaceful rest, your awareness travels now to a small farming village where a young mother named Kisa faces the greatest loss any parent can endure. The morning began like any other, with her toddler son playing in the garden while she prepared the day's meals. But by afternoon, the child lies lifeless in her arms, struck by a sudden fever that no medicine could break. Kisa's grief is beyond measure. She cradles her son's small body, refusing to believe that his bright spirit has departed, refusing to accept that she will never again hear his laughter or feel his small hand in hers. Neighbors gather around her with their own hearts breaking, but their attempts at comfort fall on ears deafened by sorrow. Word of the Buddha's presence in a nearby town reaches the village, carried by a traveler who speaks of the great teacher's wisdom and compassion. Desperate for any possibility of help, Kisa wraps her son in a clean cloth and begins the journey to find this renowned teacher, carrying hope that perhaps his power can restore her child's life. She finds the Buddha sitting beneath a grove of mango trees, surrounded by disciples and local people who have come to hear his teachings. When the crowd sees Kisa approaching with her tragic burden, they part respectfully, their own hearts moved by her obvious anguish. Kisa approaches the Buddha directly, laying her son's body before him with trembling hands. "Master," she pleads, her voice hoarse from crying, "they say you have great powers, that you can heal any sickness. Please, bring my child back to life. He's all I have in this world. Without him, I cannot continue living." The Buddha looks at Kisa with infinite compassion, seeing not just her individual grief, but the universal sorrow that every parent has known since the beginning of time. His response is neither a miracle nor a dismissal, but something more mysterious and ultimately more healing. "Dear woman," he says gently, "I will help your child. But first, I need you to do something for me. Go into the village and bring me a handful of mustard seeds. But you must obtain these seeds only from a household where no one has ever died, where death has never visited, where no one has ever experienced loss." Through her tears, Kisa nods eagerly. This seems like a simple request, and her heart leaps with hope that her child's salvation is near. She leaves him in the Buddha's care and hurries into the town, knocking on the first door she encounters. "Please," she says to the woman who answers, "I need a handful of mustard seeds from a household where no one has ever died." The woman's face fills with understanding and sympathy. "Oh dear, I would gladly give you mustard seeds, but I cannot meet your condition. Just last year, my elderly father passed away peacefully in his sleep. And before that, we lost my husband's mother to a long illness." Kisa thanks her and moves to the next house, then the next, then the next. Each household welcomes her warmly and offers whatever mustard seeds she needs, but none can claim to have been untouched by death. In one home, parents grieve a daughter lost in childbirth. In another, children have lost their grandfather. In every household, she finds the same reality. Death has visited everyone. Loss is the common experience of all families. As the day progresses and Kisa visits house after house, something profound begins to shift in her understanding. She starts truly listening to the stories people share, how this family lost a young father to accident, how that family watched a grandmother slowly fade from illness, how another family still mourns children who died years earlier. With each story, Kisa realizes that her devastating loss, while unique in its specific details, is not unique in its essential nature. Every parent she meets has felt, or fears, feeling exactly what she feels now. Every household has wrestled with the same impossible questions that torment her. Why did this happen? How can life continue? Where do we find meaning after such loss? But she also notices something else in these conversations. Despite their losses, these families continue to love, to care for living children, to find moments of joy even amid their sadness. Their hearts have been broken, but they have not closed. Their lives have been changed forever, but they have not ended. As evening approaches, Kisa realizes she has visited every household in the village without finding even one that meets the Buddha's condition. She returns to the mango grove, no longer carrying desperate hope for a miracle, but bearing a different kind of understanding. "Master," she says, settling before the Buddha with her son's body still wrapped in her arms, "I could not find a single household untouched by death. Every family has experienced loss. Every parent knows the pain I'm feeling now." The Buddha nods gently. "And what does this teach you, dear woman?" "It teaches me that my suffering, though it feels completely isolating, is actually part of the common human experience. I thought I was alone in this pain, but I see now that grief is something every loving heart must face. She looks down at her son's peaceful face, and for the first time since his death, her tears carry not only sorrow, but also a strange kind of acceptance. My son's death is not a punishment or a cruel exception to how life should be, she continues, her voice gaining strength. It's part of the same impermanence that touches every life, every family, every heart that dares to love. The Buddha reaches out and places a gentle hand on her shoulder. You have understood something that many people spend lifetimes trying to learn. Your son's death is indeed part of the natural flow of life, just as his birth was. Your grief is the natural response of a loving heart to loss. But how do I live with this knowledge? How do I continue when everything inside me wants to die with him? By recognizing that love itself is not impermanent, even when its objects change form. The love you feel for your son doesn't die when his body dies. That love becomes part of you, and through you, it can continue to flow to other children who need care, other parents who need understanding, other hearts that are breaking just as yours has broken. In the days that follow, Kisa undergoes a gradual transformation. She performs the proper rituals for her son's body with a heart that is still broken but no longer consumed by rage against reality. She begins to see other children in the village with eyes opened by loss to how precious and fleeting childhood is. Slowly, almost without conscious decision, Kisa begins reaching out to other parents who face difficulties with their children. Her experience of devastating loss has given her a unique ability to offer comfort and practical help without empty platitudes or false cheerfulness. She knows intimately what it means to love something you cannot protect, to care for something you cannot keep. Over time, Kisa becomes known throughout the region as someone who can help parents navigate both the joys and sorrows of raising children. Her own childlessness becomes not just a personal tragedy, but a source of wisdom and compassion that serves countless other families. Years later, when people ask Kisa about her transformation from a grief-stricken mother to a source of comfort for others, she always tells the story of the mustard seeds. The Buddha's wisdom was not in refusing to help me, she explains, but in showing me that my help lay not in reversing my loss, but in understanding its meaning. When I realized that every parent shares the same fundamental vulnerability, my grief transformed from an isolating prison into a bridge that connects me to all loving hearts. She pauses, her face still carrying traces of sorrow, but also a profound peace. My son's death taught me that love is stronger than loss, not because it prevents loss, but because it transforms loss into compassion. The love I could no longer give to him finds expression in caring for other children, other families, other hearts that need what I learned through my breaking. Tonight, as you rest in deep peace, consider how your own experiences of loss or difficulty might become bridges of understanding to others rather than walls that separate you. Can you sense how even your deepest wounds might become sources of healing when approached with wisdom and compassion? Let your breathing slow as you rest in the recognition that no one suffers alone, that every breaking heart joins the vast community of those who have loved and lost and learned to love again in new ways. As this journey into compassion and interconnection draws to a close, feel how these teachings have naturally opened your heart. Ananda's scorpion shows us that true compassion flows regardless of the responses we receive. Kusala's generous poverty reveals that real wealth lies in our capacity to share rather than accumulate. Kisa's terrible loss becomes the doorway to understanding our shared vulnerability and our shared strength. Notice how your body has grown naturally heavier as these stories work their gentle magic, each teaching dissolving another layer of the separation between yourself and others. compassion is not something we must force or fake, but something that emerges naturally when we recognize the truth of our deep interconnection. Your breathing has become deeper and slower as your heart has opened to the understanding that another's suffering truly is our suffering, another's joy truly is our joy. This is not merely a beautiful ideal, but the fundamental truth of how life actually works. As we prepare for the next part of our journey, we turn toward the profound teachings on awakening and Buddha nature, the recognition that the peace and wisdom we seek are not distant goals, but our own deepest nature, always available, always perfect, simply waiting to be discovered beneath the surface movements of the mind. These seeds of compassion planted tonight will continue flowering in their own time, bearing fruit in kindness you don't need to plan or direct. Simply rest now in the vast heart that connects all beings, knowing that as you heal, all beings heal. As you awaken, all beings awaken. Feel yourself drifting toward even deeper rest, carried by the gentle current of universal love that flows through every seeking heart, every open mind, every moment of genuine care. As we drift deeper into this peaceful night of wisdom, your body has found its natural state of profound rest. The teachings on foundation, letting go, and compassion have prepared the soil of your awareness for the most profound recognitions that the peace you seek is not something to be attained, but something to be remembered, not a distant goal, but your very nature. Feel your breathing becoming slower and deeper still as we explore stories of awakening, not as dramatic events reserved for special people, but as the gentle recognition of what has been true all along. These ancient tales reveal that Buddha nature is not something we must develop, but something we must simply stop covering over. Let these timeless teachings carry you into the depths of rest, where the deepest insights arise not through effort, but through the natural settling of the mind into its own luminous clarity. Feel your awareness drifting like mist through ancient forests, where tall trees filter sunlight into gentle columns of gold. Here, in the mountains where few travelers venture, a simple woodcutter named Huike makes his living harvesting timber for the villages below. For 20 years, he has walked these same paths, cut these same types of wood, lived according to the predictable rhythms of hard physical labor. But something has been stirring in Huike's heart recently, a restlessness he cannot name, a sense that life holds some deeper meaning he has not yet discovered. His work, once satisfying in its simplicity, now feels somehow hollow. His small mountain cabin, once a place of peaceful solitude, now echoes with questions he cannot answer. One morning, while cutting wood in a particularly remote grove, Huike encounters an old monk sitting in meditation beneath a massive pine tree. The monk's presence is so still, so integrated with the forest itself, that Huike almost passes by without noticing him. But something about the quality of stillness draws Huike's attention. He has known the quiet of empty forests, but this is different. Not the absence of activity, but the presence of something profound. The monk seems to radiate the very peace that Huike has been unconsciously seeking. Setting down his axe, Huike approaches respectfully and waits for the monk to open his eyes. When he does, they hold a clarity that seems to see through surface appearances to something deeper. "Venerable sir," Huike begins hesitantly, "I don't mean to disturb your practice, but I find myself drawn to ask you something. I've been working in these mountains for years, and I thought I understood what life was about: honest work, simple living, taking care of basic needs. But lately, I feel like there's something I'm missing, something important that I can't even name." The monk, whose name is Senkan, regards Huike with gentle attention. What is it you think you're missing? I don't know exactly. Peace, maybe? Purpose? Some deeper understanding of what this life is really about? I look at you sitting there, and I can sense something I don't have, a kind of completeness or satisfaction that goes beyond just being comfortable. Senkan nods slowly. And where do you imagine this peace or understanding might be found? Wike considers this question seriously. In study, perhaps? In meditation practice? In living more virtuously? I've heard of masters who spend decades learning sacred texts and sitting in contemplation. Maybe if I abandoned this simple life and dedicated myself to spiritual practice. Before you abandon anything, Senkan interrupts gently. Show me your troubled mind. Point to this thing that lacks peace. Huike starts to respond, then pauses. He looks within, searching for this troubled mind he's been assuming exists. I can feel that something is unsettled, that something wants to understand. Yes, but show me where this unsettled mind is located. Is it in your chest, your head, your hands that hold the axe? The woodcutter searches more carefully, trying to locate the source of his spiritual restlessness. When I look for it specifically, I can't quite grasp it. It's like trying to catch mist in my hands. Ah, Senkan says with a slight smile, if you cannot find this troubled mind even when you search for it carefully, then what exactly needs to be fixed or improved? Huike sits quietly for a long moment, this question penetrating deeper than any teaching he might have expected. Are you suggesting that the problem I think I have doesn't actually exist? I'm suggesting you investigate your assumptions. You came to me believing you lacked something: peace, understanding, purpose. But when I ask you to show me exactly what is lacking, can you find it? The woodcutter continues his inner searching, and a strange thing begins to happen. The more he looks for what is wrong, the less substantial his dissatisfaction becomes. It's peculiar, he admits. When I'm not looking for what's missing, I feel its absence strongly. But when I try to locate it precisely, it seems to dissolve. And right now, in this moment of looking, what is your experience? Huike turns his attention to his present moment experience with a quality of attention he's never applied before. Right now, I notice the warmth of sunlight on my face, the sound of wind in the pine needles, the solid feeling of earth beneath me. My breathing is calm, my body relaxed. There's an awareness present that seems quite peaceful, actually. This awareness that notices the sunlight and wind and earth, is this awareness troubled? Does it lack anything? Something begins to dawn in Huike's understanding, like sunrise gradually illuminating a landscape that was always there but hidden in darkness. The awareness itself seems complete. It's not looking for anything or wanting to be different. It's just aware, just present. This awareness that is naturally present, naturally peaceful, this is what you've been seeking in complicated spiritual practices and distant teachers. This is what the Buddha pointed to as our original nature, not something to be developed, but something to be recognized. Huike feels a shift so subtle yet profound that he can barely believe its simplicity. You mean the peace I was looking for has been here all along? I've been like someone searching everywhere for spectacles that are sitting on their own nose? Senkan chuckles softly. Precisely. The Buddha nature, the awakened awareness that all the scriptures describe, this is not something foreign to you that must be imported from outside. It is the very consciousness through which you see the forest, hear the birds, feel your own aliveness. But then why did I feel so restless, so sure something was missing? Because you became identified with thoughts and feelings that arise within awareness rather than resting as awareness itself. It's like mistaking the clouds for the sky or the waves for the ocean. The clouds come and go, but the sky remains clear. The waves rise and fall, but the ocean is undisturbed. As this understanding settles in, Huike notices his perception of everything around him seems subtly transformed. The trees are still trees, the work of woodcutting is still work, but there's a quality of presence underlying it all that he had somehow been overlooking. So I don't need to abandon my life and become a monk, he asks. Buddha nature expresses itself as readily through honest work as through formal meditation. The key is recognizing that the awareness within which work happens is already awake, already free, already complete. Whether you're cutting wood or sitting in meditation, the same unconditioned awareness is present. Huike sits quietly, absorbing this teaching. It seems almost too simple. The most profound truths usually are. We complicate them by believing that something so accessible couldn't possibly be what we're looking for. We assume awakening must be dramatic, difficult, special. But consciousness itself is the most ordinary thing in the world, so ordinary we overlook it completely. Over the following days, Huike continues his woodcutting with a completely different quality of attention. Instead of working mechanically while his mind churns with restless thoughts, he finds himself naturally present to each swing of the axe, each step along the forest paths, each moment of rest between tasks. The work doesn't become any easier physically, but it no longer feels hollow or meaningless. There's a quality of meditation present in each activity when performed with awareness rather than mere habit. The peace he was seeking reveals itself not as something to be attained through spiritual effort, but as the natural state of consciousness when not clouded by the search for something better. When Huike encounters Senkan again several weeks later, the monk immediately notices the change in the woodcutter's presence. "How is your practice?" Senkan asks. "I'm beginning to understand that I don't have a practice." Huike replies with a gentle smile. "I have a life, and awareness is naturally present within every aspect of it. Sometimes that awareness seems clouded by worry or restlessness, but the awareness itself is never actually disturbed. And your search for something missing? I realize now that I was like a fish swimming frantically through the ocean searching for water. The very awareness that felt dissatisfied was itself the peace I was seeking. I just needed to recognize what was already here rather than trying to get somewhere else." Years later, people in the mountain villages begin to notice something different about the humble woodcutter. His work continues as before, but there's a quality of presence about him that brings peace to others. Children are naturally drawn to him. Troubled adults find themselves feeling calmer after brief conversations with him. When asked about his transformation, Huike always points people back to their own immediate experience. "Look for what is looking," he suggests. The consciousness that is aware of dissatisfaction is itself completely at peace. The mind that seeks awakening is already awake. It just needs to stop seeking long enough to recognize itself. Tonight, as you rest in deepening peace, turn your attention to the awareness that is noticing these words, that is aware of your breathing, that knows the sensation of your body settling into sleep. This awareness itself, not as a concept, but as your most immediate, intimate experience, what the teachings point to as your Buddha nature. Can you sense how this awareness is naturally peaceful, naturally complete? It doesn't need to be improved or developed, only recognized. Like Huike discovering the peace he sought was already present, you need only notice what is already here, naturally awake, naturally at rest. Let your breathing slow as you settle into this recognition, not as an idea, but as your most basic, ever-present reality. Your body continues to sink deeper into comfort as we travel now to a famous monastery where students from across the land come to study with a revered Zen master. The monastery is known for its rigorous training, and competition among students is intense as they strive to demonstrate their spiritual understanding and gain the master's approval. Among these students is a young monk named Shengshu, whose intelligence and dedication have earned him recognition as the most promising disciple. He memorizes sutras effortlessly, his meditation posture is flawless, and his understanding of Buddhist philosophy impresses even senior monks. Everyone, including Shengshu himself, assumes he will be chosen as the master's successor. Also at the monastery works a man named Huineng, who pounds rice in the kitchen to feed the community. Huineng is illiterate, came from a poor family, and has never studied the sacred texts that occupy so much of the other students' time. Most of the monks barely notice him, seeing only a simple laborer doing necessary but unremarkable work. One day, the aging master announces that he wishes to choose his successor, the one who will inherit his teaching authority and guide the monastery after his death. Instead of simply naming his choice, he sets a challenge. Each student should compose a poem demonstrating their understanding of the essence of Buddhist teaching. The poem that best captures the truth of awakening will identify the next master. The students buzz with excitement and anxiety. This is the opportunity they have trained for, the moment when years of study and practice will finally be tested. Shengshu, confident in his abilities, spends days crafting what he believes will be a winning verse. Late one night, when the monastery is quiet, Shengshu writes his poem on the wall where everyone will see it. The body is the Bodhi tree. The mind is like a bright mirror's stand. At all times we must strive to polish it and not let dust collect upon it. When the other students discover the poem in the morning, they are impressed by its wisdom and elegant expression. The verse captures perfectly the conventional understanding of Buddhist practice, that through diligent effort we can polish the mirror of consciousness until it reflects reality clearly, free from the dust of ignorance and delusion. The master reads Shengshu's poem and nods approvingly, but says nothing about choosing his successor. He simply instructs that the poem remain on the wall for all to contemplate. That evening, as Huineng works late in the kitchen, he hears other workers discussing the poem. Since he cannot read, they recite it aloud, explaining how it demonstrates deep understanding of the spiritual path. As Huineng listens, something stirs in his understanding. The poem, while expressing conventional wisdom accurately, seems to him to miss something fundamental about the nature of consciousness itself. Unable to write, Huineng asks a literate worker to help him compose a response poem, which he has written beside Shengshu's verse. Bodhi originally has no tree, the bright mirror has no stand. Buddha nature is always clean and pure, where can dust collect? When the students discover this second poem in the morning, reaction is mixed. Some dismiss it as the confused writing of an uneducated kitchen worker who doesn't understand the sophisticated points of Buddhist philosophy. Others sense something profound in its directness, though they can't quite articulate what. Shengshu himself feels both confused and threatened by the simple verse. How can he say the mirror has no stand? He asks other students. How can he claim Buddha nature needs no polishing? This contradicts everything we've been taught about the importance of practice and purification. But when the master reads Huineng's poem, his face shows a recognition that has been absent until now. He calls for the rice pounder to meet with him privately that evening. In his simple quarters, the master looks deeply into Huineng's eyes. "Do you understand what you wrote?" "I understand what I experience," Huineng replies simply. "When I look for this mind that needs polishing, I cannot find it. When I search for dust on the mirror of awareness, I find only clear knowing. The very consciousness that would do the polishing is already pure, it just needs to recognize its own nature." The master nods slowly. Shengshu's poem expresses the path of gradual cultivation, the belief that through persistent effort we can purify consciousness and eventually achieve enlightenment. Your poem points to sudden recognition, the understanding that awareness is already enlightened and needs only to recognize itself. "Are both approaches valid?" Huineng asks. "Both have their place in helping people according to their temperament and understanding. But your poem points to something more fundamental. Tell me, when you pound rice in the kitchen, what is your experience? There is the rhythm of the pestle, the texture of the grain, the sensation of physical effort. But underlying all of this is a knowing presence that is simply aware of everything arising and passing away. This awareness itself is never tired, never confused, never in need of improvement. And this awareness, is it different when you're working than when you're resting? The contents of awareness change. Sometimes there's work, sometimes rest, sometimes thoughts, sometimes silence. But the awareness itself is constant, like space that remains unaffected whether it contains clouds or clear sky. The master smiles with deep satisfaction. You have recognized what many students miss after decades of study. Buddha nature is not something to be developed through practice, but something to be acknowledged as already present. The mirror of consciousness is not gradually polished to clarity. It is inherently clear, and we need only stop believing that it's dusty. Over the following days, word spreads that the master has chosen Huineng as his successor. Many students are shocked and angry. 5. How could an illiterate rice pounder be selected over brilliant scholars like Shengshu? Shengshu himself approaches the master, his confusion evident. "Teacher, I don't understand your choice." Huineng knows none of the scriptures, has no formal training, cannot even read the sacred texts. How can he guide others who are more educated and experienced? The master considers this question carefully. Knowledge of scriptures and philosophical understanding have great value for helping others learn. But the essence of teaching is not transmitting concepts, but pointing people toward their own Buddha nature. This requires not more knowledge, but clearer recognition of what is already present. He pauses, looking compassionately at his devoted student. "Your years of study and practice have been valuable, Shengshu. But they have also created a subtle assumption that awakening is something to be achieved through accumulation and effort. Huineng's clarity comes from recognizing that consciousness is already awake. It just needs to stop trying to wake itself up. But surely practice is necessary? Surely we must work to purify the mind? Practice can be helpful for settling mental agitation and developing beneficial qualities. But if we practice with the assumption that we lack Buddha nature and must develop it, we reinforce the very ignorance that causes suffering. True practice is the expression of Buddha nature, not the method for attaining it. That night, Huineng quietly leaves the monastery, knowing that his selection has created too much controversy for peaceful teaching. He spends the next 15 years in hiding, deepening his realization while working at various humble jobs. When he finally emerges to teach, his approach revolutionizes Zen Buddhism. Instead of emphasizing gradual purification through accumulating merit and knowledge, he points directly to the mind's inherent enlightenment. Instead of complex practices designed to achieve awakening, he shows people how to recognize the awareness that is already awake. Years later, when students ask about the difference between his teaching and more gradual approaches, Huineng often refers to the two poems that marked his recognition as the master's successor. Both poems contain truth, he explains. If you believe your mind is dusty, then by all means practice polishing it. But don't forget to ask, who is doing the polishing? The consciousness that seeks to purify itself is already pure. It just needs to recognize its own nature instead of focusing on imaginary dust. He smiles gently at his students. The most profound realization is also the simplest. What you are seeking, you already are. The Buddha nature you hope to develop is the very awareness through which you understand these words. Stop looking for it somewhere else and recognize what is looking. As you rest deeply tonight, consider your own relationship to spiritual seeking. Are you trying to polish a mirror that is already clear? Can you sense the awareness that knows your thoughts and experiences without being disturbed by them? This knowing presence is your Buddha nature, not something to be developed, but something to be recognized as what you most fundamentally are. Let your breathing slow as you settle into this recognition, not as a concept, but as your most basic, intimate reality. Like the mirror that is inherently bright, your awareness is naturally clear, naturally awake, naturally at peace. Feel your consciousness drifting deeper now, like settling into a warm pool of perfect stillness. Let your awareness travel to a small roadside tea stall where an old woman has served travelers for 30 years. Her tea house is nothing special to look at, a simple wooden structure with a few rough tables and benches, but travelers often speak of the unusual peace they experience there. The old woman, whose name is Kaoshan, moves through her simple tasks with unhurried grace. She prepares tea with complete attention, serves food with genuine care, and listens to travelers' stories with presence that makes each person feel truly heard. There's something about her that makes people slow down, breathe deeper, speak more honestly about their lives. One day, a famous Zen master named Dongshan arrives at her tea stall during a journey between monasteries. He is accompanied by several disciples who treat him with obvious reverence, hanging on his every word and competing for his attention and approval. Dongshan has heard rumors about this old woman from other travelers, stories suggesting that despite her lack of formal education or monastic training, she possesses unusual wisdom. He decides to test her understanding, perhaps expecting to find simple faith rather than genuine insight. As Taoshan serves tea to the group, Dongshan poses a question designed to reveal the depth of someone's realization. Old woman, where does Buddha nature reside? The question is a classical test, one that could be answered in sophisticated ways, demonstrating knowledge of various Buddhist philosophical schools. The disciples lean forward, curious to hear how this simple tea seller will respond to their master's profound inquiry. Taoshan pauses in pouring tea, not from confusion, but from what seems like genuine consideration of the question. Then, instead of giving a verbal answer, she simply continues serving, placing cups before each person with careful attention, filling them with perfectly prepared tea, offering small cakes with gracious hospitality. Dongshan waits for her verbal response, then realizes that her actions may themselves be the answer. "I asked you about Buddha nature," he says, with slight impatience. Can you respond to my question? Cao Shan looks at him with eyes that hold both humor and compassion. Honored sir, I have been answering your question continuously since you arrived. Buddha nature is not hiding somewhere that requires special knowledge to locate. It is expressing itself in every moment of genuine presence. She gestures to the teacups. When I prepare this tea with full attention, Buddha nature prepares tea. When I listen to a traveler's worries with an open heart, Buddha nature listens. When I clean these simple tables with care for the next guests, Buddha nature cleans. One of the disciples interrupts, but those are just ordinary activities. Surely Buddha nature is something more profound than serving tea and cleaning tables? More profound than presence itself? Cao Shan asks gently. More profound than the consciousness that knows and cares and responds appropriately to each situation? What could be more profound than awareness expressing itself as ordinary kindness? Dongshan, beginning to sense that he's encountering genuine wisdom rather than simple faith, presses further. But how do you know you've realized Buddha nature? What confirms your understanding? Instead of answering directly, Cao Shan asks him, when you drink this tea, who tastes it? I do, of course. And this I that tastes, can you show me where it exists? Is it in your mouth, your mind, your body? Dongshan considers this question, recognizing it as a pointing toward the non-dual nature of experience. The I that tastes cannot be located as a separate entity from the tasting itself. Exactly. And this non-separate awareness that knows the taste without being different from the tasting, this is what expresses itself when I serve tea, when you drink it, when birds sing in the trees outside. There is no Buddha nature separate from the natural functioning of consciousness in each moment. She refills his cup with the same careful attention she's given throughout their conversation. You ask how I know I've realized Buddha nature. The question assumes Buddha nature is something to be possessed or achieved. But Buddha nature is what asks the question, what hears the response, what understands or doesn't understand the teaching. One of the younger disciples, clearly struggling with this non-conceptual approach, asks, then why do we need meditation? Why study scriptures? Why practice at all if Buddha nature is already functioning? Cao Shan smiles warmly at the young man. Practice can be wonderful for settling mental agitation and developing helpful qualities. But the most important practice is recognizing what is already present rather than trying to achieve something that isn't here yet. She wipes the table with the same attention she gives to everything else. When you meditate, what meditates? When you study, what understands the teachings? When you try to find Buddha nature, what is doing the seeking? The very capacity that engages in spiritual practice is itself the Buddha nature you're seeking. Dongshan sits quietly, recognizing that his initial intention to test this old woman's understanding has transformed into receiving profound teaching from her. You speak of Buddha nature as if it's the most ordinary thing in the world. Because it is. It's so ordinary, so constantly present that we overlook it while searching for something special or exotic. It's like wearing glasses while frantically searching for them. The very thing that enables our seeking is what we're seeking. As the afternoon progresses, more travelers stop for tea, and Dongshan observes how Cao Shan interacts with each person. Her responses are perfectly suited to each individual, challenging the arrogant, comforting the troubled, listening patiently to the lonely, offering practical advice to the confused. But what impresses him most is that none of this appears calculated or forced. Her responses arise naturally from a deep presence that seems to know instinctively what each situation needs. This is Buddha nature in expression, not as a philosophical concept, but as lived wisdom responding appropriately to life as it unfolds. When Dongshan and his disciples prepare to leave, he bows deeply to Caoshan, a gesture of respect that surprises his students who have never seen their revered master bow to a layperson. "Thank you for this teaching," he says sincerely. "You have shown me that realization is not about achieving special states or accumulating spiritual knowledge, but about recognizing the natural awareness that is always present, always responding, always complete." Caoshan bows in return. "You honor me, Master. But remember, the Buddha nature that received this teaching is the same Buddha nature that gave it. There is only one consciousness expressing itself as teacher and student, question and answer, seeking and finding." Years later, when students ask Dongshan about the most profound teaching he ever received, he often tells the story of the old woman's tea stall. "She taught me that enlightenment is not somewhere else, waiting to be discovered through special efforts. It is the natural functioning of consciousness in each moment, sometimes clear, sometimes clouded, but always present, always Buddha nature expressing itself as whatever is happening." He pauses, smiling at the memory. The most extraordinary realization is recognizing the absolute ordinariness of what we truly are. Buddha nature serves tea, washes dishes, listens to travelers' stories, and answers Zen masters' questions with the same natural presence. It is what you are, not what you might become. Tonight, as you rest in deepening peace, notice the consciousness that is aware of these words, that knows the sensation of breathing, that experiences the settling of your body into sleep. This aware presence is your Buddha nature, not something special or mystical, but the most ordinary, intimate aspect of your being. Like Caoshan serving tea with complete presence, you can recognize that whatever you're experiencing right now is Buddha nature expressing itself as your life. There's nothing to achieve, nothing to become, only the recognition of what you have always been. Let your breathing slow as you settle into this understanding, not as a belief, but as your most immediate reality. The awareness that knows these words is the same awareness the Buddha recognized, the same consciousness that all teachings point toward. It has been with you always, will remain with you always, is in fact what you most essentially are. As your body grows heavier and your breathing naturally slows, let your awareness drift to a prosperous trading city where merchants from distant lands gather to exchange goods. Among them is a successful trader named Vimaladatta, whose wealth has grown substantially over the years through careful planning and shrewd business decisions. Yet, despite his material success, Vimaladatta finds himself troubled by strange dreams that have been recurring for months. In these dreams, he sees himself as different people, sometimes a poor farmer struggling with drought, sometimes a sick beggar pleading for help, sometimes a grieving mother, sometimes even animals fleeing from hunters. Each dream is vivid and emotionally intense. He feels the farmer's desperation as crops fail, experiences the beggar's humiliation when people turn away, suffers the mother's heartbreak over a lost child. When he wakes, it takes time to remember who he actually is, the successful merchant whose life is quite comfortable and secure. These dreams begin to affect his waking hours. He finds himself wondering about the experiences of people he encounters in his business, the laborers who carry his goods, the servants in his household, even the animals that transport his merchandise. Previously, he had seen them simply as part of the machinery of commerce. Now, he wonders what their inner lives are like, what fears and hopes they carry. Disturbed by these unusual dreams and the questions they raise, Vimaladatta seeks out a wise teacher who is known for understanding the deeper meanings of such experiences. The teacher, an elderly monk named Asanga, listens carefully as Vimaladatta describes his nightly visions. "Master," Vimaladatta concludes, "these dreams feel more real than my waking life sometimes. I'm beginning to question which experience represents my true identity, the successful merchant I appear to be during the day, or these various suffering beings I become in my dreams." Asanga considers this question thoughtfully. "Tell me, during your dreams, do you doubt that you are the farmer, the beggar, the grieving mother, or do those experiences feel completely real and immediate?" "They feel absolutely real. When I'm the farmer, I have no doubt that farming is my life, that the drought threatens everything I've worked for. When I'm the beggar, I know with complete certainty that this is my reality, that I depend on others' charity to survive. And when you wake up as the merchant, which identity feels more true?" Vimaladatta pauses, recognizing the depth of this question. Initially, the merchant identity feels more real because it's continuous, more familiar. But as the day progresses and I remember the intensity of the dream experiences, I start wondering if they're revealing something about reality that my ordinary consciousness doesn't perceive. "What if both experiences are dreams?" Asanga suggests gently. "What if the consciousness that experiences itself as a merchant is the same consciousness that experiences itself as a farmer or beggar, just wearing different costumes in different plays? You're suggesting that my merchant identity is also a kind of dream?" "Not exactly. I'm pointing to something more fundamental. There is awareness that knows the merchant's experience, awareness that knows the farmer's experience, awareness that knows the beggar's experience. This knowing consciousness itself, what is its identity?" Vimaladatta searches within for this awareness that Asanga is pointing toward. The awareness that knows all these different experiences. It doesn't seem to have a fixed identity. It's present in all of them, but it isn't limited to any of them. Exactly. This consciousness that can experience itself as merchant or farmer, human or animal, happy or suffering, this is what Buddhist teaching calls Buddha nature. It's the pure awareness that can take on any identity while remaining essentially unchanged. As this understanding begins to settle, Vimaladatta looks around the teacher's simple room with different eyes. "Are you suggesting that the same consciousness that's aware through my experience is also aware through your experience? That we're somehow the same awareness wearing different forms? What does your own investigation reveal? When you look deeply at the consciousness that knows your thoughts and experiences, and when you imagine the consciousness that knows my thoughts and experiences, can you find any essential difference between them?" Vimaladatta contemplates this question, and gradually a profound recognition begins to dawn. It's like. If consciousness is like space, then individual identities are like different rooms built within that space. The rooms have different contents, different purposes, but the space itself is continuous throughout. That's a helpful metaphor. The space of consciousness is not divided by the walls of individual identity, even though it appears from within each room as if the walls create real separation. Over the following weeks, as this understanding deepens, Vimaladatta finds his dreams becoming less disturbing and more illuminating. Instead of feeling confused about which identity is real, he begins to recognize that all identities are temporary expressions of the same fundamental awareness. This recognition transforms how he conducts his business. When he looks at his employees, he no longer sees separate individuals whose welfare is unrelated to his own. He recognizes the same consciousness looking back at him through different eyes, experiencing life through different circumstances. His treatment of workers improves dramatically, not because he forces himself to be more ethical, but because he naturally wants to alleviate suffering when he recognizes it as his own suffering appearing in different forms. His business practices become more generous and fair, not from external obligation, but from internal recognition of unity. The dreams gradually become less frequent as Vimaladatta integrates their teaching into his waking understanding. When they do occur, he experiences them with fascination rather than disturbance, recognizing them as consciousness exploring different aspects of its own nature. One day, months later, Vimaladatta returns to visit Asanga and share how his life has transformed. "The dreams taught me something I couldn't learn any other way," he explains. "They showed me that individual identity is much more fluid and temporary than I believed. The consciousness that experiences life as me is the same consciousness that experiences life as everyone else. And how has this recognition affected your daily life? Everything is the same and completely different simultaneously. I still conduct business, still live in my house, still have the same personality and preferences. But there's an underlying recognition that these are temporary expressions rather than my ultimate identity." Vimaladatta pauses, watching birds through the window. "Most remarkably, I feel less separate from others and from life itself. When I help someone, I experience it as consciousness helping itself. When I see beauty in nature, it's consciousness appreciating its own expression. Even when I witness suffering, there's a quality of intimacy with it that wasn't there before. This is the awakening that Buddha nature makes possible," Asanga confirms. Not escaping from individual life, but recognizing that individual life is Buddha nature temporarily experiencing itself in particular forms. The merchant, the farmer, the beggar, all are Buddha nature exploring different aspects of existence. Years later, when other merchants ask Vimaladatta about his transformation from someone focused solely on profit to someone known for unusual wisdom and generosity, he often tells them about his dreams. "Those dreams taught me that what I thought was my fixed identity, successful merchant, was actually just one temporary expression of something much larger. When you truly understand that the consciousness looking through your eyes is the same consciousness looking through everyone else's eyes, business becomes a form of spiritual practice, and success means contributing to the well-being of the whole." Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, consider your own dreams and how they reveal the fluid nature of identity. The consciousness that experiences dreams is the same consciousness that experiences waking life, aware, present, unchanged whether the content is familiar or strange, pleasant or difficult. This awareness that knows all your experiences while being limited by none of them is your Buddha nature. It has appeared as every character in your dreams, every version of yourself you've ever been, every experience you've ever had. Yet, it remains essentially unchanged, essentially free, essentially awake. Let your breathing slow as you rest in this recognition, allowing yourself to settle into the spacious awareness that is your deepest nature. Like Vimaladatta's dreams revealing the unity beneath apparent differences, your own rest tonight can reveal the awakened consciousness that has been present all along. As this exploration of awakening and insight draws to a close, notice how these profound recognitions have naturally deepened your rest. Huike's meeting with Senkan reveals that what we seek is the very awareness that's seeking. Huineng's mirror poem points to the Buddha nature that needs no polishing, only recognition. Cao Shan's tea service demonstrates enlightenment, expressing itself through ordinary presence. Vimaladatta's dreams show how consciousness explores different identities while remaining essentially unchanged. Feel how your body has grown naturally heavier as these teachings worked their silent transformation, each story revealing another aspect of the fundamental truth that awakened awareness is not something to be achieved, but something to be recognized as your own most intimate nature. Your breathing has become slower and deeper as these insights settled into understanding beyond concepts, beyond beliefs, into direct recognition of what you have always been. The peace you've been seeking is the very consciousness that has been doing the seeking. As we approach the later stages in our journey, we turn toward the profound rest that comes from recognizing that there's ultimately nothing to attain, nothing to fix, nothing to become. These closing teachings on simple being and deep rest will carry you into sleep itself as a form of awakening, where the ordinary miracle of consciousness naturally settles into its own perfect nature. The seeds of recognition planted tonight will continue flowering in dreams and in the space between dreams, in ways that don't require your effort or understanding. Simply rest now in the vast awareness that knows all experiences while being limited by none, that dreams all identities while remaining eternally free. Feel yourself being carried toward the deepest rest of all, the recognition that what you are seeking, you already are. As we enter the final part of this gentle journey through Buddhist wisdom, your body has found its natural state of complete relaxation. The teachings on foundation, letting go, compassion, and awakening have prepared your heart and mind for the deepest rest of all, the recognition that you need do nothing more than simply be. Feel your breathing becoming so slow and deep that it seems to breathe itself. We explore now the profound rest that comes from understanding that you are already perfect as you are, that this moment is already complete, that the peace you've been seeking has been here all along, waiting for you to stop searching and simply arrive. Let these final teachings carry you into sleep itself as a form of awakening, where consciousness naturally returns to its source, where all seeking dissolves into the perfect stillness of simply being. In the misty mountains of ancient China, where clouds drift between peaks like slow thoughts across a vast mind, there lived a monk whose reputation puzzled everyone who heard of him. Unlike other renowned teachers known for their brilliant teachings or miraculous powers, Master Lazy Cloud was famous for doing nothing at all. His small hermitage, perched on a cliff overlooking a valley of pine trees, contained the barest essentials: a sleeping mat, a teapot, a few simple robes. No impressive library of sacred texts, no elaborate altar, no stream of pilgrims seeking wisdom. Just one old monk who seemed to spend his days sitting quietly, watching clouds drift across the sky. Word of this unusual teacher reached a young monk named Fayan, whose head was full of questions about Buddhist practice and philosophy. Fayan had studied with several masters, accumulated extensive knowledge of scriptures, and developed considerable skill in meditation. Yet, despite all his learning and practice, he felt no closer to the peace that all the teachings promised. Convinced that Master Lazy Cloud must possess some secret teaching hidden beneath his apparent inactivity, Fayan made the difficult journey up the mountain path to the hermitage. He found the old master exactly as described, sitting peacefully on his porch, apparently doing nothing but watching the play of light and shadow across the valley below. "Master," Fayan said, bowing respectfully, "I have traveled far to receive your teaching. I've studied extensively, but still haven't found the true peace that Buddhism promises. What special practice or insight can you share that will finally bring me to enlightenment?" Lazy Cloud looked at the earnest young monk with gentle eyes that held neither urgency nor laziness, just a quality of restful attention. "I don't teach anything special," he replied simply. "I just sit here and watch the clouds." Feiyan waited for more. Surely this was just the beginning of a profound teaching that would unfold into complex wisdom. But the master simply returned his attention to the sky, where white clouds drifted slowly across the blue vastness. "But master," Feiyan persisted, "surely there must be more to your practice than just watching clouds. What meditation techniques do you use? What scriptures do you study? How do you cultivate wisdom and compassion?" "When I'm hungry, I eat," Lazy Cloud responded without shifting his gaze from the sky. "When I'm tired, I sleep. When the sun shines, I enjoy warmth. When it rains, I listen to the sound of water on the roof. What else is there to cultivate?" Feiyan felt frustrated by these simple responses that seemed to offer no practical guidance. But what about the noble truths? What about the Eightfold Path? What about all the teachings that show us how to overcome suffering and achieve liberation? Now, Lazy Cloud did turn to look at the young monk, his face holding both compassion and gentle amusement. "Are you suffering right now, in this moment?" Feiyan automatically started to list his concerns, his spiritual progress, his unanswered questions, his desire for deeper realization, then paused to actually check his present moment experience. Sitting on the peaceful porch, breathing the clean mountain air, surrounded by natural beauty, what suffering could he actually locate? Well, I suppose right now I feel quite peaceful, actually. But I know suffering will return when I encounter difficult circumstances or when my mind becomes agitated again. And when that happens, will you still be sitting here breathing mountain air? No, I'll be somewhere else, in different circumstances, with different thoughts and feelings. So you want to solve the problems of imaginary future moments while missing the peace of this actual moment? Something in this question stopped Feiyan's mental momentum completely. He had indeed been so focused on preparing for hypothetical future difficulties that he was overlooking the natural ease available right now. But surely we must prepare for challenges. Surely we must develop wisdom and strength through practice to handle whatever life brings. Lazy Cloud nodded slowly. When challenges come, we respond to them. When practice is needed, we practice. When wisdom is required, it arises naturally from presence. But trying to solve tomorrow's problems with today's worry only creates unnecessary suffering in a moment that might otherwise be peaceful. As the afternoon progressed, Feiyan gradually stopped asking questions and began simply sitting with the master in comfortable silence. The urgency to understand something complex or achieve something special slowly faded, replaced by an appreciation for the simple fact of being alive, aware, and present on a beautiful mountainside. When the sun began to set, painting the sky in soft colors, Lazy Cloud prepared simple tea and shared it with his guest. The tea was nothing extraordinary, just hot water poured over plain leaves, but somehow it tasted perfect, exactly right for this moment, this place, this simple exchange between two human beings. "Master," Feiyan said quietly, "I'm beginning to understand something, but I can't quite put it into words." "The most important understanding usually can't be put into words," Lazy Cloud replied. "Words are useful for pointing toward truth, but they can also distract us from experiencing it directly. What I'm sensing is that I've been making enlightenment into something complicated that requires special effort and achievement, when actually it might be as simple as this. Just being present, just responding naturally to whatever is happening. What do you think Buddha nature is doing when you watch these clouds drift across the sky? Feiyan considered this question, letting his attention rest in the simple act of seeing. Buddha nature is watching clouds? Is there any difference between Buddha nature watching clouds and you watching clouds? Is there some separate entity called Buddha nature that must be achieved or developed? Or is Buddha nature simply the natural awareness that knows these colors, shapes, and movements? A profound simplicity began to dawn in Feiyan's understanding. You're saying that what I am right now, in this ordinary moment of awareness, is already Buddha nature expressing itself? What else could it be? The consciousness that sees beauty in the sunset, that appreciates the warmth of tea, that naturally feels compassion for others' suffering, this is Buddha nature. Not something you need to develop or achieve, just something you need to recognize and trust. That evening, as they prepared for sleep, Feiyan realized he felt more genuinely peaceful than after years of intensive practice and study. Not because he had gained something new, but because he had stopped trying to be different from what he naturally was. "Master," he asked as they settled into their simple bedding, "if enlightenment is this simple, why do so many people struggle with spiritual practice for decades without finding peace?" Lazy Cloud's voice came softly through the darkness. "Because they don't trust their own Buddha nature. They think it needs to be improved, purified, or developed before it can bring them happiness. But Buddha nature is already perfect, already peaceful, already present. It just needs to stop trying to become something other than what it is." The sound of wind through pine trees filled the comfortable silence between them. "Your practice," the master continued, "is not to achieve some special state, but to recognize and trust the awareness that is already here. When you do this, everything becomes practice: eating, sleeping, walking, working, even doing nothing at all." Feiyan spent several more days at the hermitage, gradually integrating this understanding into his being. He discovered that when he wasn't trying to be enlightened, presence came naturally. When he stopped evaluating his spiritual progress, contentment arose spontaneously. When he quit seeking special experiences, ordinary moments revealed their inherent completeness. When he finally prepared to leave, Feiyan bowed deeply to his teacher. "Thank you for showing me that what I was seeking was what I already am." Lazy Cloud smiled. "I didn't show you anything. You recognized your own nature by simply stopping long enough to notice it. This recognition is available to everyone, always, in every ordinary moment." Years later, when Feiyan had become a teacher himself, students often asked him about the most important teaching he ever received. He would tell them about Master Lazy Cloud and the profound lesson of doing nothing special. "The deepest wisdom," he would say, "is recognizing that what you are right now, in this ordinary moment, is already the Buddha nature that all practices point toward. You don't need to become someone else or achieve special states. You need only trust the awareness that is naturally present, naturally peaceful, naturally wise." Tonight, as you settle into sleep, remember Master Lazy Cloud's teaching. You don't need to do anything special, achieve any particular state, or become someone different. The consciousness that knows these words, that feels your body settling into rest, that naturally releases into sleep, this is already your Buddha nature, already perfect, already free. Let your breathing slow as you trust this natural awareness, allowing it to simply be what it already is without trying to improve or change it. Like clouds drifting across a vast sky, thoughts and experiences come and go, but the awareness that knows them remains spacious, peaceful, and complete. The return to silence. As your breathing becomes so gentle, it hardly seems to move. Feel your awareness settling like dust in a closed room, like water finding its own level, like the natural return of all things to their source. We come now to the end of our journey through Buddhist wisdom, but this ending is really a beginning, the recognition that all seeking eventually leads back to the simple silence from which all experience emerges. In this final story, there is no story, only the vast spaciousness of awareness itself, tired of wearing costumes, ready to rest in its own boundless nature. Like the Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree, you too can rest in the understanding that there's ultimately nowhere to go and nothing to achieve. Feel your body becoming so relaxed that it seems to merge with whatever supports it. Your breath so slow and natural that it breathes itself. Your mind so peaceful that thoughts arise and dissolve like bubbles in champagne, leaving only the clear awareness that has been present throughout all our stories, all our seeking, all our finding. This awareness that has listened to teachings about foundation and letting go, that has opened to lessons on compassion and recognition of Buddha nature, this same awareness now prepares to rest in its own source. Like a river finally reaching the ocean, it was always flowing toward. In this deep rest, there's no need to remember any teaching, no effort to maintain any particular state of mind. Just as the body naturally knows how to sleep without instruction, consciousness naturally knows how to rest in its own perfect stillness. The monastery bells that called us to mindful presence, the gardens that taught us acceptance, the mirrors that showed us our original face, the wells that revealed our interconnection, all of these were nothing more than consciousness recognizing itself in different forms, awareness playing at being a student, discovering what it has always known. Now, as sleep approaches like a gentle tide, all the characters in our stories, the monks and masters, the seekers and finders, the struggling and the awakened, all reveal themselves as temporary expressions of the one consciousness that you are, that you have always been, that you could never not be. The woodcutter who found peace in simple work, the merchant who discovered wealth in sharing, the mother whose grief became compassion, the student whose seeking dissolved into recognition, all were the play of your own Buddha nature, exploring different aspects of its infinite nature. And now, like a master storyteller who has finished the evening's tales, consciousness prepares to rest in the silence from which all stories arise. Not the absence of awareness, but awareness so complete, so natural, so effortless that it needs no object, no experience, no story to confirm its existence. In this settling into sleep, there's no one sleeping and nothing to sleep into, only the natural return of awareness to its own source, like space relaxing back into space, like light settling into light, like silence deepening into the perfect silence that contains all sounds, yet remains forever undisturbed. The teachings of Buddhism, the wisdom of all the world's great traditions, the seeking of countless generations, all point toward this simple rest, this natural ease, this uncomplicated presence that needs no effort to maintain and no practice to achieve. Your breath grows so quiet now, it's barely perceptible. Your heart beats so gentle it seems to pulse in rhythm with the universe itself. The boundary between your individual consciousness and the vast awareness that contains all experience dissolves like salt in water, leaving only the taste of pure being. There's nothing more to seek, nothing left to understand, nothing additional to achieve. The peace you've been looking for has been here all along as the very seeking itself. The love you've been yearning for is the very capacity to yearn. The wholeness you've been pursuing is the very consciousness that pursues. Rest now in this recognition, not as a thought, but as your most intimate reality. Let sleep come naturally, knowing that even in the deepest rest, the essential awareness that you are continues, perfect and unchanged, like the clear sky that remains serene, whether filled with clouds or empty of all phenomena. The stories we've shared tonight were just waves on the ocean of consciousness, temporary forms appearing in the vast space of awareness that you are. Now the waves settle back into the ocean, and the ocean rests in its own infinite depth, its own boundless peace, its own perfect stillness. From the deepest rest, you need do nothing. Be nothing special. Achieve nothing more. Simply allow consciousness to rest in its own nature, as vast as space, as natural as breathing, as peaceful as the deepest sleep, as awake as the most luminous awareness. This is the final teaching, that there is no final teaching, only the endless rest of awareness in its own perfect nature. Sleep now, dear friend, knowing that you are already everything you have been seeking, already home in the heart of Buddha nature itself. Let go completely. Trust the natural wisdom of consciousness as it settles into its own source. Rest in the peace that passes all understanding, the silence that contains all sounds, the stillness that is never disturbed by any movement. You are home. You have always been home. Sleep in the perfect peace of recognition, wrapped in the boundless love that is your own deepest nature, cradled in the infinite awareness that you are and have always been. All is well. All is perfect. All is complete. Rest now in the silence that has no beginning and no end, the peace that is your birthright, the love that is what you are. Sleep peacefully, knowing that when you wake, you will still be the same Buddha nature that is settling into rest right now, perfect, whole, and naturally free, just as you have always been. Final integration. And so our journey through the wisdom of ages comes to its natural completion, like a river reaching the sea, like the evening star settling into dawn. 3 hours of gentle teachings have washed through your awareness, each story a doorway opening to the same eternal truth that what you seek, you already are. From our first encounter with the monastery bell that taught us about the natural peace of awareness, to this final settling into the silence from which all wisdom emerges, every teaching has pointed to the same recognition. Your Buddha nature is not something to be attained, but something to be remembered, not a distant goal, but your most intimate reality. Feel how these ancient wisdoms have worked their subtle magic, not by adding something new, but by removing what was never really there, the belief that you are separate from the peace you seek, different from the love that surrounds you, apart from the wholeness that is your deepest nature. Your body rests now in complete ease, your breath flows with natural rhythm, your mind settles into its own luminous clarity. This is not the result of effort, but the natural state revealed when effort ceases, not an achievement, but the uncovering of what has been present all along. The teachings will continue their gentle work as you sleep, seeds of wisdom flowering in dreams you may never remember, insights ripening in the fertile darkness of rest. Trust this natural process as you would trust a garden to grow while you sleep, knowing that consciousness itself is the gardener tending the growth of understanding. When you wake tomorrow, you will still be the same Buddha nature that is settling into sleep tonight. The same awareness that listened to stories of compassion will open its eyes to a new day. The same peace that learned about letting go will meet whatever circumstances arise. The same love that recognized its interconnection with all beings will move through your life, blessing everyone you encounter with its natural kindness. From all of us at Sleepy Monk, we offer our deepest gratitude for sharing this journey into the heart of Buddhist wisdom. May you rest in profound peace, knowing that you carry within you an inexhaustible treasure, the awakened consciousness that is your true nature. May you dream the sweetest dreams and wake refreshed in the natural joy of simply being. May these teachings continue flowing through your life like a gentle stream, nourishing all those whose paths cross yours. And may you always remember the simple truth that underlies every Buddhist teaching: you are already perfect, already whole, already home in the heart of unlimited awareness. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Sleepy Monk.